A strange, dark red energy begins to rise from the center of a mountain valley. Chained in a dark cave, a frail man is questioned about how he is feeling. He is the eldest young master of the Luoyang sword-fighting family and can only let out a groan of pain. The prisoner tries to move as the sound of heavy chains echoes throughout that gloomy place. He screams in agony while the mysterious voice comments on his deplorable state. The voice tells him there is no need to try to speak, as it has been watching him since the moment they tore out his tongue. It wasn't a pleasant sight, but the entity claims it can perfectly hear the voice of his heart. In the silence of his mind, the young master desperately asks who that creature is. He despairs because he cannot see anything, and the voice reminds him that his eyes were torn out with hot iron. The voice continues the psychological torture, reminding him that his delicate arms and fingers also suffer. Even his fragile legs, which used to walk through beautiful, clean courtyards, were brutally struck. As he fainted from pain, his limbs were severed one by one, bringing terrible memories back. With a bizarre smile on his bloody face, he wonders how he could have forgotten how he got there. The red entity points out that he must have forgotten because he was too busy being tortured for so long. The young master asks about the fate of his family, causing the creature to laugh at his concern. The terrible revelation follows, with the voice coldly stating that his family was completely annihilated. The entity orders him to try to remember and think of all the precious things he ended up losing. Images of destruction and fire consume the young man's memories as the ruin of his clan is shown. A sword stuck in the blood-soaked ground represents the terrible price paid for the fall of his own family. The creature says this tragic fate is something the young master already knows very well. His eldest sister tried to flee the ruin, but she ended up beaten and murdered by her own husband. Meanwhile, his second sister, who was a skilled warrior, also met a terrible fate. Her energy center was destroyed, and she ended up losing her life at the hands of cruel criminals. He shouts in desperation, saying he didn't know anything and that he still had talented and warrior siblings in the family. The creature questions if he really had no idea what was happening to his relative. The monster reveals that after he left to get married, his siblings started a bloody war against each other. All that violent dispute happened just so they could take the empty position of clan patriarch. The young master used to ignore everything around him to focus only on reading his books. Because he set aside his responsibilities to study, the voice asks if he was truly blind to the truth. He swears he didn't know anything because he was an ordinary man, but the creature finds it ridiculous for him to call himself that. The entity shows enormous frustration with the humble answer given by the prisoner. A glimpse of the past shows the young master as a child beside his mother amidst several scriptures. At only 4 years old, he already helped organize hundreds of complex medical texts. At 5, he advised the emperor and soon after predicted a great drought, saving thousands from starvation. To the creature, great names in history were nothing but mere amateurs compared to his brilliance. The monstrous being asks again if he has finally managed to remember his true genius. The young man finally admits in his thoughts that he actually knew absolutely everything, without missing a single detail. He was born under a cursed star and knew that his involvement in the world would make many people bleed. The creature laughs aloud and explains that since everyone around him has already died, his terrible fate has been fulfilled. He accepts that, despite all his efforts, he could not escape the shackles of his absolute destiny. With no options left, the young man decides to leave the future in the hands of divine judgment, for the justice of heaven is relentless. He believes that even without acting, the guilty will be judged according to the great law of cause and effect. The creature is furious with this blind faith and shouts, calling the prisoner a fool for thinking that way. The monster grabs him by the neck, asking why heaven would care about a human so weak and insignificant. If he truly wishes to see the law of cause and effect, the creature prepares to show him an ancient story. The scene changes to the distant past, in a mythical era full of legends and great mysteries forgotten by time. In those days, there were sages who believed piously in the natural order of things and sought enlightenment. While some sought spiritual purity, the wicked continued committing atrocities without hesitation. Cruel men lived in luxury and died in peace, while the vast majority of good people suffered. They went through severe exploitation and pain, leaving this world long before the end of their natural lives. Regardless of being good or bad, all who died simply returned to dust in the same empty lofty way. Faced with this, the voice questions how anyone still has the audacity to look for some kind of law of cause and effect. Behind all this terrible worldly illusion created to deceive men, the truth is much crueler. There is nothing but the purest and most absolute ruthlessness coming from all the forces of heaven and earth themselves. The creature states with absolute certainty that a truly fair judgment has never existed in this cruel world. Hearing that, the young man lets out a sarcastic laugh while thinking about the ideas of punishment and divine judgment. He wonders if it was all just a big lie created by desperate people without any hope. It is at this moment that the mysterious red entity asks the crucial question, wanting to know if he desires power. Without hesitation, he answers yes, and the voice asks if he wishes to change his entire destiny and save his family. With an unwavering determination shining in his chest, the young master reaffirms that he wishes to conquer that strength. The being asks if he would accept this, even if the price charged were the eternal suffering of his own soul. He accepts the deal without thinking twice, determined to use every one of his skills to grab this chance. He swears he will command his own destiny, making the creature notice that he has finally accepted his true self. The power of darkness begins to envelop him as the entity promises to grant him a new golden opportunity. The dark energy spreads rapidly throughout his body, initiating a frightening transformation. With a manic smile, the young man opens his bright purple eye as the entity tells him to look at it. The heavy chains that bound him finally break and fall to the floor of that dark, silent cave. The young master rises with renewed legs as the voice reveals the bizarre origin of that profane scripture. He walks to the mysterious floating book, whose pages were written with the blood of someone who hated the heavens. The voice explains that, despite having very different goals, the path they will follow from now on is the same. The scripture pulses with a sinister energy, reinforcing the invitation to seal the pact and receive a new chance. Without any hesitation, the young man seals the terrible contract, handing over his own soul to the power of darkness. An immense pillar of energy emerges and consumes the environment as the voices proclaim the beginning of his new destiny. He discovers that the dark artifact he now possesses is the legendary scripture of the Sovereign of Darkness. The sacred book was specifically created to replace the apparent indifference that governs the natural law of the world. This forbidden scripture defies the heavens themselves and was made to devour all the evil existing on earth. The voice asks if he is truly ready to take on the role of judge and punish all sinners without mercy. With his determination and the immense power of the dark book, any miracle will become completely possible. From now on, he will walk directly through the darkness to rewrite the entire history of his lineage. Suddenly, a bright blue eye opens at full strength, showing that something drastic has happened. He emerges from the shadows as the sacred executor of darkness, tasked with judging all the karma of this world. An immense beam of light appears in the sky right above the Wongak Pavilion, which serves as a residence for the young master. The wooden gates of the courtyard open slowly, revealing a quiet morning under the invigorating sunlight. Lying comfortably in his bed, the young man rests in peace as the magical aura dissipates around him. He opens his eyes abruptly, revealing a clear blue iris that glows intensely in the brightness of the room. The young master sits up in bed with a racing heart and an expression of absolute shock on his face. He begins to breathe heavily, trying in every way to catch his breath after that nightmare. The young man stands paralyzed with dread while trying to understand what just happened to his own mind. He looks around and realizes he is surrounded by shelves full of scrolls and antique vases. The familiar scenery makes the young man wonder if he is really back in his old room in the pavilion. Upon placing his bare feet on the wooden floor, he remembers the promise about receiving a new chance. Looking in the mirror and seeing his body completely whole, he realizes that he truly traveled back in time. He notes that he returned to when he was only 17 years old, well before all the tragedies plagued his clan. At that instant, the voice of a servant outside asks if the young master just coughed in there. The servant whispers, complaining about the pathetic state of the heir to the most powerful family in the Central Plains. Another servant comments that he will just read books all day, calling him pathetic for not using a sword. The man laughs, gossiping that the heir's former fame as a genius was probably just a simple rumor. Even with the perfect acoustic insulation of the room, the young man realizes he can hear the gossip clearly. A strange, dark energy begins to emanate from his body, showing that his senses have changed drastically. He focuses his gaze on his own hand and sees mystical black marks glowing under his rejuvenated skin. He realizes that his strength, stamina, and all other physical senses have improved impressively. The young man wonders, astonished, if all that absurd flow is really the immense hidden power of the scripture. However, upon observing himself, he begins to worry a lot about his new demonic appearance. With a strong thirst for blood and evil energy in his bones, he looks much more like a demon than a human. Knowing he cannot leave his room like this, he tries to relax his face to look like someone normal. However, upon sketching a bizarre smile, the young man realizes that the task of looking ordinary will be quite complicated. He wonders about the meaning of being human, concluding immediately afterward that this question no longer mattered. After focusing his energy, he finally manages to soften his features and leave his face presentable and calm. With everything perfectly prepared and his appearance back to normal, he decides the time has come to start. The young man takes his first firm steps toward the exit, feeling the cold wooden floor under his feet. He pushes the large sliding doors of his room, letting the strong daylight invade the entire room. Upon looking at the blue sky, the air feels a deep, cool breeze of freedom touch his face gently. Walking quietly through the courtyard under the watchful eye of a servant, he displays a very confident countenance. The two servants bow quickly and respectfully, greeting him and asking if he was feeling unwell. The heir stares at one of the employees in a way so cold and imposing that it makes him extremely uncomfortable. The servants return to whispering very quietly behind his back, puzzled by the unusual posture he shows today. The young man focuses on his hands, remembering the terrible and deep darkness he faced in the torture cave. He extends his hand toward the sunny sky with a friendly smile, feeling the energy of the new chant. Feeling the welcoming warmth of the sun on his face, the young man turns abruptly and catches the attention of one of the servants. Without mincing words, the young master gives a direct and firm order for all his subordinates to be gathered there. Completely stammering and sweating with nervousness, the employee can only agree and runs off to comply. Within a few minutes, a large line of dozens of employees forms in the main courtyard in front of the pavilion. The servants complain quite a bit among themselves for having been woken up, mocking his lack of talent. One of the servant leaders mutters angrily about the reason they are standing there just waiting in silence. Observing the noisy crowd from afar, the young man walks calmly and asks if everyone has gathered yet. He maintains an icy, unshakable expression that clashes completely with his former peaceful and weak attitude. The heir suddenly announces that none of them are needed there anymore, leaving everyone in a state of absolute shock. He coldly orders everyone to head to the head butler's office to receive new assignments. Outraged by the sudden dismissal, some employees start shouting furiously, saying they will not accept it. The crowd joins in an aggressive protest against the young master, shouting that the decision is absurd and unfair. The heir reflects on how naive he was in his past life to believe that kindness would be reciprocated. He foolishly believed that his sincerity would one day reach the hearts of those people who despised him so much. Now he realizes that he just wanted to deceive himself, letting out a slight, discreet, ironic laugh at himself. Upon seeing the heir in silence, the servants begin to laugh quietly, thinking they have managed to bend his will. To the general surprise of everyone present in the courtyard, the young man suddenly begins to laugh uncontrollably. Ceasing the laughter, he stares at the leader of the rebels with a look so sharp it chills the employee's spine. Completely terrified by the sudden change in mood, the man answers in a trembling, frightened way. The young man approaches imposingly and asks who he is, making the servant stammer his name and title as heir. He questions if those who openly defy him think they are the true owners of that entire house. The servant leader turns pale with dread upon realizing the gravity of the accusation of treason made against him. The heir reminds him that the punishment for disobeying and defying the direct lord's orders is usually relentless. The man's legs begin to shake violently before the terrible threat of losing one of his limbs. Panic takes over, and the servant immediately throws himself to the ground, begging desperately for mercy. The other employees watch the scene in absolute silence, feeling cold sweat running down their faces out of fear. Several servants begin to bang their heads on the floor hard, claiming they have entire families to support. In tears, they beg for forgiveness, swearing they never had any real intention of disrespecting the young master. With an enigmatic smile on his face, the young master places his index finger on his lips, calling for silence. Upon seeing the entire crowd bowed and submissive before him, the young man wonders if everything was indeed that simple. He smiles, satisfied, realizing he has managed to easily remove all the spies who were watching his steps. The heir says the blame for the insolence was his own, and decides to forgive them of their physical punishment if they leave soon. In a tone of voice that accepts no replies, he simply orders everyone to pack their things and disappear from there. Relieved to have kept his life, the man hits his forehead on the floor and thanks him repeatedly for the great kindness. While still bowed, the servant is taken by surprise when the young master begins to dictate a new instruction. The heir orders the head butler to be notified to personally choose a new servant who is entirely trusted by him. Under the morning light, the dismissed servants hurry to leave while the young man watches the sky quietly. He looks at his own hand under the sun's rays, finding it curious how daylight can be so warm and lively. Even feeling the warmth, he cannot see the sun directly and wonders if the light has turned its back on him as well. The heir accepts that from now on he must live, breathe, and judge all sins under the cloak of shadows. The scene cuts to a luxurious red-carpeted room, where an informant comes running to give an urgent warning. He whispers that the young master just sent away all the employees who were acting as spies in his pavilion. The news about the heir's drastic and intelligent attitude leaves the listeners in that room in a thoughtful silence. Some mysterious and sinister figures are deeply angered by the heir's boldness, whom they consider a worm. In the head butler's office of the family, the clan leader reflects on the day that has finally arrived. Sitting behind his desk, he ponders that he already imagined something like this would happen sooner or later. He finds it very intriguing that the heir dismissed everyone at once after spending 10 years without showing any attitude. The old man remembers a scene from the past he could never forget, from when he saw the young man wield a sword. In that striking memory, the heir performed a move so powerful that it shocked everyone with his hidden talent. The men who witnessed that moment were totally disbelieving before such technical skill. The heir's imposing look and firm posture were already comparable to those of a true grandmaster of the sword. The butler realizes that the period in which he could only protect him from afar and maintain his safety has come to an end. A young and beautiful servant named Jung-ah appears in the room and bows with immense elegance to greet the master. The chief receives her warmly and asks her to come closer, as he has a matter of extreme importance to discuss with her. Responding to her master's call immediately, the girl walks decisively through the large hall toward the old man. He explains that he always valued her highly, and that is why he was very cautious when deciding who would be the ideal master for her. The old man warns that the succession of the great sword-fighting family will change drastically, and the young master will be the center of it. He leaves the final decision entirely in her hands, asking if she accepts to go serve in the young heir's pavilion. Demonstrating great loyalty and respect, the servant accepts the dangerous mission, saying she will obey the order without hesitation. With his rare, bright golden eyes, the butler trusts she will be able to read the young man's true intentions. The young woman walks slowly toward the stairs of the grand pavilion where the mysterious heir of the family lived. She stops before the grand structure, observing the details of the huge residence with great attention and caution. She recalls the old man's warning that, even if the master was reclusive, that place hid a colossal strength. A guard on duty at the gate wakes up and questions her, making her explain that she was sent to be the new servant. Upon noticing that one of the guards seemed sleepy in broad daylight, the young woman feels a slight distrust. Soon she realizes that those are not ordinary soldiers, but very powerful warriors placed to guard the location. With a firm countenance and an elegant posture, she presents herself formally as the heir's new personal servant. She extends her arm calmly to hand over the official document, proving her authorization signed by the chief. One of the warrior guards just yawns lazily and orders them to give free passage for the young woman to enter. She finds it very strange that high-level masters let her pass so easily without performing a detailed search. The huge wooden gates of the main entrance begin to be opened by the strong guards with a loud Yunga maintains her calm and focused expression while waiting for the full opening of the path leading to the garden. Before her is revealed a beautiful wooded path surrounded by dense and mysterious natural vegetation. At that instant, one of the sentinels at the gate breaks into a smirk and comments that he had forgotten a detail. The young woman turns, surprised by his sudden speech, immediately feeling that something dangerous was about to happen. Ignoring the warning, she begins to walk alone through the trees as the sound of her footsteps echoes through the brush. Upon taking her first steps and looking around, she realizes, frightened, that that trail is not an ordinary forest. The young woman notes that the location is actually part of a complex and extremely powerful magical protection barrier. She gives mental thanks for possessing her special golden eyes, without which she would certainly end up lost there. The immense magical pressure exhaled by the barrier is so overwhelming that it makes her feel suffocated and very vulnerable. While she tries to locate herself in the middle of the dense woods, a male voice echoes suddenly, catching her attention. The heir observes her from afar and finds it curious how an apparently ordinary girl managed to notice the magical barrier. The young servant is immediately frightened to hear that mysterious voice echoing very close to her. She turns her face quickly in the direction of the sound, trying to find who spoke so suddenly. Through the large trees of the dense forest, the young master appears, walking quietly. He approaches imposingly and questions her about the intense way she is staring at him. Sketching an enigmatic smile, the young man comments that the young servant is really a very unusual person. The girl stands paralyzed with dread upon feeling the immense spiritual pressure and frightening aura coming from him. Suddenly, everything around her begins to change, and she wonders desperately where she ended up. Amidst a deep and frightening darkness, a small, bluish flame appears floating before her eye. A terrible demonic face with a bright blue eye emerges from the shadows with a horrifying smile. She wakes up frightened from a suffocating nightmare, breathing very heavily after the terrible illusion. However, several dark hands begin to emerge from the dark water, trying to grab her defenseless body. She screams in pure dread while those frightening claws pull her violently back into the abyss. The black hands tighten around her neck and cover her mouth, preventing her from letting out any kind of plea for help. In her final thoughts of pure desperation, the girl cries out internally for help to whoever can hear her. She extends her weak hand toward the sky in the hope that some charitable soul will appear to save her from there. Totally unexpectedly, a strong and firm hand holds her fingers with great firmness and pulls her up. The young master welcomes her affectionately in his arms, successfully rescuing her from that terrible nightmare. Observing her very closely, the young man thinks to himself that the head butler indeed sent a very curious young woman. The scene changes and shows the girl resting on a comfortable single bed inside a well-lit room. Upon waking slowly, she sits up in bed and wonders confusedly where exactly she is now. She observes every corner of the cozy room, noting that the decor of the environment is quite simple and elegant. Upon putting her feet on the floor, she ends up bumping unintentionally into a large pile of old books accumulated there. Upon looking at the pages open on the floor, she sees detailed illustrations of medicinal herbs and human anatomy. Curious, she extends her fingers delicately to touch the rare scriptures scattered around the room. Upon analyzing the titles of the works around her, she is impressed with the absurd amount of knowledge there. It is a complex manual containing medicine secrets from several sects and sword-breathing techniques. She looks astonished at the huge wooden bookshelf and wonders if all those works are also relics. She is in shock upon realizing that several of those valuable books should be kept only only in the imperial palace. Touching her forehead lightly, the young woman tries to recall how exactly she ended up lying on that bed. Her beautiful golden eyes glow intensely while she begins to rescue the last memory fragments. She decides to open the sliding wooden doors to try to find someone who can give her answers. Looking outside, the girl lets out a sigh of astonishment before the beautiful view that is revealed. A magnificent, crystal-clear water canal cuts through the entire property under a stone bridge bathed in sunlight. Even being in the middle of winter, she notes, intrigued, that the climate inside the property seems pleasant like spring. The young master appears in the courtyard, asking if she slept well and calling her to come down as soon as she is ready. With cheeks flushed with shyness, she answers quickly that yes, and prepares to go speak to her lord. At the top of the pavilion, under the orange afternoon sky, the young man's calm voice echoes, asking if her name is Jung. She confirms respectfully, but is embarrassed when he comments in a joking way that she was quite heavy. Without quite understanding the comment, she stammers, surprised, while trying to remember having fainted in the woods. He says he remembers perfectly when she collapsed in his arms, making her shout in shame that she doesn't remember. The heir explains that he found her fainted during his walk and that she would be in trouble if he took longer. Extremely grateful, she bows deeply and swears she will serve the young master with all her loyalty and life. The young man interrupts her coldly, saying he never accepted her and questioning if the butler thinks he can give him orders. He throws the official recommendation document at her feet, ordering in a harsh tone for her to take it back. The servant widens her golden eyes in complete dread, realizing she just gravely offended her lord. Desperate, she throws herself to the ground, begging for forgiveness and asking to be punished with death for her audacity. The young man finds that dramatic situation funny, pointing out the irony of having saved her just for her to ask for death. She swears she will value her life, while the young master stares at her golden eyes and recognizes her from his past life. He smirks while reflecting on how bizarre destiny is for having put her in his path in this new life. The young man stares intensely at that bright golden look, recognizing in her the famous and legendary witch of the past. The young master changes the subject completely, bending down to ask calmly if she knows how to cook. She confirms with a smile on her face, leaving the servant quite flushed and surprised by the physical proximity. Next, a large fire begins to crackle intensely under the pots of a well-equipped kitchen. Sitting in front of the stove, the girl laments her situation, thinking that everything is the fault of her fainting in the woods. Despite seeming like just a dream, she has absolute certainty of having seen a bizarre creature in the shadows. She lets out a long sigh of concern, trying to convince herself that everything was just a simple nightmare. To ward off bad thoughts, she pats her own cheeks and decides to focus entirely on cooking. While cutting the ingredients, she reflects on the absurd control and power of that man whom they call weak. Suddenly, the heir appears quietly behind her, asking if the dinner menu will be meatball. She is startled to see him so close, and he jokes, saying that food should be the most important thing there. The young man smiles in a friendly way and warns that he is very hungry, asking for the dinner not to take long to come out. With her cheeks very red from shyness, the servant just agrees and returns quickly to her work. She serves an impressive banquet on the table, and the young man compliments her for preparing everything with such agility. The heir invites her to sit and eat with him, but she refuses politely, saying she will have dinner later. With a serious look and an imposing posture that accepts no refusal, the young master just repeats for her to sit. With no other choice, she sits in the chair opposite in silence, obeying the firm order of her lord. With great gentleness, the young man uses the chopsticks to place one of the meatballs directly on her plate. Quite confused and surprised by such generous treatment, the girl can barely believe what she sees. He continues serving more food for her, who feels very shy about feasting before her master. Maintaining a fixed and calm look at her, the young man just orders again for her to start eating. Still very shy with the whole unusual situation, she bites the meatball and agrees in silence with him. The young man asks with curiosity what she thought of the flavor, and she answers that the food is very tasty. Satisfied with her approval, the heir finally takes a portion for himself and starts eating as well. He opens a genuine smile while complimenting the wonderful seasoning, highlighting the perfect balance of flavor. Liking the dish very much, the young man extends his empty bowl and asks politely for a second serving of the meal. He compliments the girl's cooking again with a happy countenance, asking for one more bowl full of food. Time passes and afternoon turns into night while the young master continues to ask for more and more food. The girl warns awkwardly that all the food is gone, making him stop even feeling that his stomach is still empty. Instead of accepting the tea offered by the servant, the young man withdraws, saying he prefers to have some wine. Alone under the full moon, he finds it strange to continue being so hungry even after eating a gigantic banquet. He wonders mockingly if the price for having rewritten time was just gaining an insatiable appetite. Suddenly, several dark hands grab his face, and the voice whispers that things are not that simple. The young man's eye glows in a frightening purple tone, while shadows cover part of his face, whispering. He rises under the moonlight, totally enveloped by a black smoke of pure and overwhelming evil energy. Darkness takes over his facial expression, completely hiding his gaze under a dense fog. A monstrous and frightening mouth appears right beside his ear and whispers, warning that the time has come. The young man takes a decisive step forward, while the demonic voice tells them to make the most of the moment. With a manic smile on his face, he jumps through the city skies, ready to start his terrible banquet. The scene changes to a busy inn in the city of Luoyang, glowing under the darkness of the peaceful night. A rich and arrogant customer complains to the attendant, demanding to sit at a table that is empty in the hall. Ignoring the desperate warnings of the employee, the grumpy man invades the place very arrogantly. He suddenly stops walking and frowns upon noticing something extremely unusual at the table in front of him. The rich man stands completely petrified and begins to sweat cold before the horrific scene he witnesses. He sees sharp teeth chewing raw meat in a savage way, while claws hold the food with brutality. The young master is devouring gigantic pieces of food with an expression of pure and insane madness in his eyes. Surrounded by mountains of empty plates, he thinks obsessively that all that food is still not enough. The man who invaded the hall retreats, trembling, unable to avert his eyes from that bizarre and horrifying banquet. His legs begin to fail him out of dread while he stammers quietly that is a hungry demon. In complete panic, the rich man shouts desperately that a hungry ghost coming straight from hell has appeared there. Oblivious to the shouts of terror around him, the young man continues devouring everything in a savage and insatiable way. The young master stands up abruptly amidst the purple smoke, drawing the attention of everyone in the inn. He turns his face slowly in the direction of the frightened men, displaying a cold and perverse expression. The young man begins to walk toward the troublemakers with a frightening calm that chills their blood. The customers and the rich man retreat, terrified with fear, upon realizing the approach of that frightening figure. The heir stops right in front of one of the men and asks coldly what the total value of the consumed meal is. Trembling from head to toe with pure terror, the employee stammers without being able to formulate a clear answer. With a frightening smile on his face, the young man hands over a heavy sack full of coins and says, "That will suffice." The attendant thanks him, trembling, while his companion whispers desperately to leave there as fast as possible. Inside, under the full moon, he finds it bizarre that his stomach remains completely empty and hungry. He wonders mockingly what in the world would be able to satisfy his hunger, thinking if he really became a hungry ghost. The young man shakes his head from side to side in a thoughtful way, trying to push away these bad thoughts. Suddenly, he feels an aroma in the air and stops walking, wondering where that unusual smell comes from. The strong and metallic smell of blood spreads on the wind, immediately waking the young man's attention. An expression of pure madness takes over his face upon feeling the aroma he considers delicious. Meanwhile, in a dark alley of the city, violent noises of brawling begin to echo through the empty night. A bloodied man is thrown brutally against the wooden floor, suffering from the violent blows. Two bandits from the Black Bones faction surround him coldly, collecting the debt and mocking his suffering. suffering. The man fallen on the floor complains furiously that the interest rate charged by those cursed collectors is an absurdity. Irritated by the complaint, one of the henchmen steps with extreme force on the debtor's hand, making him scream in pain. The group leader orders them to stop the aggression, deciding just to steal the poor man's identification plaque. One of the bandits bends down nimbly to pull the metal identification pendant from off the ground. With a perverse smile, the boss mocks, saying that with that plaque, he will be able to sell even his wife and children. Desperate, the man begs in tears for them to take his own life instead of hurting his family. The henchmen return to beating him without any mercy, saying his old body is not worth absolutely anything. The boss makes horrible threats about the man's children until a strange whistling sound cuts the air of the alley. One of the henchmen is startled by the sudden sound and looks to the sides, demanding to know who is approaching. The mysterious whistle begins to cause an unbearable headache in one of the criminals, who screams furiously. The bandit boss orders everyone to be silent immediately to try to focus on the origin of that bizarre sound. Feeling cold sweat dripping, the leader realizes that whoever is whistling can shake the souls of his men. He makes a formal greeting to the darkness, asking if the powerful hidden warrior has business with them. The three criminals position themselves on guard in the middle of the bluish fog, waiting tensely for the stranger's appearance. The silence of the alley is broken only by the tense sound of swallowing hard, while the leader trembles with nervousness. He bows and asks respectfully for the mysterious figure to appear at once and reveal himself before them. Firm and heavy footsteps begin to echo slowly through the alley's stone floor, breaking all the tension. The young master emerges imposingly from the shadows, totally enveloped by black energy and bright purple eyes. He stops right in front of the criminal leader, who retreats, scared by the evil presence of that young man. With a demonic smile on his face, the heir says he felt a delicious aroma coming from exactly that direction. The warrior is totally terrified upon seeing the sharp fangs and the expression of madness on the young man's face. The leader tries to pull his sword in desperation, but the heir approaches fast and holds his arm with force. The man lets out a terrible scream of agony while feeling the bones of his wrist being crushed mercilessly. The leader writhes in pain with his arm totally broken, shouting desperately in the middle of the dark alley. The other two henchmen watch everything with eyes widened in horror, unable to react out of so much fear. The young man lifts the leader by the neck with just one hand, letting the black energy consume the man's body. He displays a devilish smile filled with blood, thinking about how that vital energy is incredibly tasty. The lifeless body of the bandit boss falls dryly to the alley floor after being totally drained. Tentacles of black smoke continue to float around the heir, who seems even stronger and more powerful. The profane energy consumes the criminal's mortal remains, breaking what was left of his defenses and his soul. A violent crash shakes the ground of the dark alley while the purple smoke dissipates in the air with great force. The young man turns his icy gaze in the direction of the remaining henchmen, noting mockingly that two are still alive. In complete desperation, the two surviving bandits turn around and run away screaming, calling him a monster. The two henchmen run desperate, trying to escape from that terrible monster who chases them in the darkness. Suddenly, the shadowy creature emerges right behind them with a frightening smile and claws ready to attack. The bald man sweats cold with dread upon realizing there is no chance of escaping alive from that alley. A bloodied hand is pressed against the wall, showing that the brutal massacre has already begun mercilessly. The other bandit bleeds from his nose and mutters desperate, believing that everything can only be a terrible nightmare. While the bald one tries to run away desperate, the young master's bloodied hand extends in his direction. The man lets out a deafening scream of agony upon being hit repeatedly by that crushing force. He bangs desperately on the locked gate, begging for help, while the shadows surround him from behind. The criminal cries and questions the reason for them being hunted when there are so many other bad men in the world. The young heir just displays a manic and frightening smile, totally covered in the blood of his victims. With sharp teeth, he approaches the face of the terrified man to whisper his final words of death. The dark entity warns with scorn that all that pain is just the beginning of a long and painful judgment. Suddenly, the young master appears fallen and totally unconscious on the stone floor of an unknown place. He opens his eyes slowly and wonders confusedly where exactly he ended up after all that chaos. The young man massages his forehead, trying to remember when he left the inn before ending up fainted on the floor. floor. He remains on absolute alert upon hearing a metallic and mysterious noise echoing very close to where he is. Upon looking around, the young man finds a huge cave filled with open and gloomy stone coffins. The young man focuses his attentive gaze and wonders if that bizarre place would actually be an underground tomb. Suddenly, a skeletal monster with bright red eyes jumps from one of the coffins in his direction. He walks calmly among the preserved bodies, admiring how they seem alive and ready for combat. A mysterious voice compliments his immense calm and recognizes him as the true heir of the sacred scripture. From the shadows emerges a hooded elder with a bizarre smile and enveloped by strong purple and mystical energy. The heir mocks the old man, saying his voice seems to be covered in mold from spending so much time there. The elder lets out a manic laugh and finds the sharp words said with so much courage by the young master funny. With a sarcastic smile, the young man asks if the lack of teeth in the old man's mouth is due to lack of oral hygiene. The elder says he likes him more and more and that the scripture of darkness has finally found an ideal receptacle. The heir answers with extreme confidence that the demonic artifact just found its true master. The old man laughs aloud at the young man's boldness and confesses he has never met anyone with such determination. He approaches curious and questions what a brat like him really knows about the mysterious scripture. The young man thinks about the immense power of the ancestral demonic artifact that was able to make him go back in time. It is a forbidden book woven with the skin and blood of immortal beings to defy the laws of heaven itself. He makes a polite greeting and asks with humility for the elder to teach him everything about the mysteries of the book. The old man focuses his bright eye and notes that people who inherit the artifact usually act in two ways. According to him, most end up falling into blind arrogance or madness so great that it prevents any dialogue. The heir finds it curious that the elder's tone changed suddenly to a much more respectful vocabulary. The elderly man laughs quietly and confesses sincerely that not even he himself totally understands that scripture. He explains that the book's real origin is an unconfirmed mystery and asks if the young man knows the reason for that. The elder reveals with a glint in his eye that the great secret is that he also belongs to the lineage of immortals. However, he corrects the sentence, saying that he was actually an immortal being before losing almost all his strength. The old man laments having decayed so much to the point of turning into something that is worth much less than dust itself. He tells he spent ages studying the demonic artifact, but every discovery just brought even more doubt. Even faced with so many difficulties and insoluble mysteries, the elder confesses he never managed to stop the research. The young man is impressed to discover that an ancient immortal spent ages studying the book without unlocking its secrets. The old man warns that great warriors tried to master the book in the past, but all ended up being devoured. Despite so many tragedies, the elder smiles in a bizarre way upon admitting he sees a flame of hope in the air. The young man is intrigued and asks the meaning of having completed an initiation ritual without him knowing. With a frightening smile, the elder asks directly if the young man has not yet started to devour his victim. The young heir stands totally paralyzed and in shock upon understanding the real gravity of that question. A glimpse of the recent past shows the young man covered in blood after the violent massacre of those henchmen. He finally understands that that terrible thirst for blood was actually the scripture itself acting through him. The old man warns that the more wicked men he consumes, the more of the sacred scripture's power will be awakened. The heir realizes that his hunger finally passed, but feels horrified by that method, which is so frightening. The elder explains that sating this dark desire is the first and last demand that the book makes to its bearer. The work received that name precisely to devour all human evil, acting in place of totally inert heaven. He reveals that the black hands are hungry spirits that will help him devour his targets using mystical energy. Several dark claws cover the criminal's face, immobilizing the young man in a frightening way amidst the darkness. Suddenly, stones begin to fall from the cave ceiling, indicating that the entire structure is collapsing. The old immortal warns with a calm smile on his face that their time limit in that place has finally run out. He says goodbye to the young man, wishing him a good hunt and promising that both will meet again very soon. The cave collapses completely with a violent crash that buries that entire sacred temple in the depth. The dawn light bathes the grand main pavilion, marking the beginning of a new day full of new challenges. The young servant warns that the morning tea is ready while reflecting on everything she discovered in that place. The young man orders her to just leave the appetizers on the table, and she agrees in a very soft tone of voice. She realizes that the huge library where her master rests is dangerous because it contains scrolls of secret techniques. Those combat manuals are so valuable that any intruder who tried to read them would be eliminated without leaving a trace. The young man's unusual attitude breaks all the rules already since he decides to cook his own breakfast joyfully. He harvests his own vegetables to help with the chores and makes a point of sharing all meals with her. Despite the great social difference between the two, the young man seems to be very used to local chores. The girl asks, quite embarrassed, if she really should sit and eat together with him at the same table once again. With a welcoming look, the young master answers that she must do this not only today, but at every meal. She tries to refuse, saying that servants should not eat before the patron, but the heir just orders her to start eating. The servant continues her mental list, noting one more very intriguing fact about her master's behavior. She has the absolute certainty that the young man demonstrates no type of romantic interest or ulterior motives in her. This leaves her confused since she is known for her rare beauty, capable of easily attracting the attention of any man. The other two brother heirs were no exception, and the women who approached them disappeared mysteriously. She feared their interest and felt relieved by the eldest brother's indifference because that guaranteed her life. She wonders if accepting the butler's advice and taking shelter in that pavilion was really the most correct choice. A wounded guard enters by surprise in the room, asking for forgiveness for interrupting and warning that he needs to give a report. The servant scolds the soldier immediately, calling him insolent for invading the room while the heir is having lunch. The messenger explains that an important visitor just arrived and the girl stands up fast, wanting to know who it is. The man tells apprehensively that the visitors are part of the powerful personal guard of the main residence. The girl is in absolute shock upon realizing that elite troop obeys only the third young master. The messenger completes the warning, saying they came to demand the delivery of the new servant who arrived the previous day. She realizes, frightened, that the dangerous dispute between the other brothers to capture her finally started for real. The young servant questions firmly how mere soldiers dare to give direct orders inside the heir's pavilion. The man laments and explains that the warriors are protected under the direct authority of his powerful feudal lord. The young master bangs his hand firmly against the wooden table and orders very calmly for her to go speak to them. The girl turns her face in absolute state of shock before that apparent lack of consideration from him. He continues reading his book quietly and says the noise is loud and she should go see what they want. She focuses her serious gaze, indignant at the audacity of the other brother for ignoring the rules to try to capture her. The young woman says goodbye, saying she will return soon, but the heir suddenly tells the guard messenger to wait. The warrior points to himself, confused, and asks in a trembling way if the young master is really talking to him. The young man stands imposingly and questions him about who gave the permission for him to invade his royal quarters. The man stammers, trying to make excuses, and explains that the gate security has changed drastically since yesterday. With a sarcastic smile, the young man asks if the absence of guards gives anyone the right to invade the room. The soldier kneels immediately and begs for forgiveness, promising that such a mistake will never happen again in his life. The heir accepts the apologies, but warns that from today on, he will be demoted to fixed gate watchman. The warrior widens his eyes in complete desperation and can barely believe in the terrible punishment received. The heir points out with authority that the man's access to any other area of the temple is totally forbidden. With a challenging look, the young master advises him to accept the punishment if he doesn't want to face something much worse. The wounded soldier accepts the order, irritated for having been demoted to a simple gate guard. The young master asks the reason for him still standing there, and the man runs off in a hurry. Outside, the visitor complains irritably about the reception and demands to be treated appropriately. The beautiful servant introduces herself formally with great calm, maintaining her posture before that visitor. The elite warrior demands harshly for her to guide him to the room of the main heir of the house. She answers firmly that the master gave no permission for visitors and tells him to say what he wants there. Offended by the refusal, the man draws his sword furiously, calling the young servant crazy and daring. He advances to attack the girl, shouting that no one has the right to provoke his immense authority. Young-ah just stares at the aggressor with her bright golden eyes without demonstrating any kind of fear. A loud impact sound echoes suddenly through the courtyard, making the servant widen her eyes in surprise. The newly demoted guard appears by surprise and blocks the sword blow with extreme agility and strength. He warns the invader that that is a forbidden area and that no one passes without the proper official authorization. The warrior shouts, infuriated, demanding to know who that meddler is, and tells him to move away from there soon. The guard releases his killer energy and warns coldly that that will be the last warning for him to retreat. The opponent chills with dread upon recognizing the immense spiritual strength that suddenly emanates from that guard. Irritated by the demotion, the guard decides to release all his dark strength to teach the invader a lesson. Realizing the imminent danger, the warrior retreats, intimidated, and says his business is only with the servant. He orders arrogantly for her to accompany him immediately to go speak with the third young master. She answers with disdain, stating that her destiny is not decided by the orders of any other master. The man is irritated by the girl's words, but she just retorts that she is following the family rules. He threatens her, saying he wants to see if she will maintain all that petulance before his main lord. The invader turns around and warns with contempt that his master does not like to use shared things. The warrior bumps irritably into a butler in a white cloak who has just entered the pavilion courtyard. The newcomer greets the two very elegantly, complimenting the good work they are doing there. He introduces himself formally as the personal butler responsible for the second young master's land. The old man hands over a mystical document and demands that the servant guide him quickly to the patron's presence. Maintaining the same firm posture, the girl warns that the eldest heir is not receiving visitors today. The old man doubts her answer and questions if the visitor prohibition is really an order from the heir. The guardian intervenes, confirming the rule, and orders the old man to leave the letter with the young servant and leave. The butler hands the letter to the young woman and casts a threatening look, warning her to remember that very well. He approaches and whispers darkly that her plans don't change the fact that she is under the clan's rule. While the old man leaves, the guard whispers that the heir never prohibited the entry of any visitor. The girl confesses she made that decision alone because she didn't feel any genuine sympathy for the heir. The warrior questions if she is acting that way to swear loyalty or just to protect herself. He questions the reason why the young master himself didn't come down to resolve that noisy situation. The girl remains silent, quite thoughtful, and decides to enter to deliver the envelope directly to the master. She recalls her difficult life path and all the people to whom she owed deep gratitude. The young servant reflects quite sincerely that she never stopped to think about the real meaning of loyalty. She realizes that she acted only out of obligation and that she had been treating her lord in exactly the same empty way. She extends her arms with respect to deliver the envelope with the official seal into the young heir's hand. Without even opening the document, the young man simply throws the sealed envelope straight into the cauldron's fire. The servant shouts, astonished, to see the paper burn quickly, turning into ashes in the middle of the flames. She warns, worried, that the message was from the second brother, but he responds with indifference that he already knew that. The girl explains that the letter contained important orders about the fate of her own stay there. She asks, with a hesitant tone of voice, if there is really no problem in burning the document without reading it. The heir retorts calmly, saying that if the matter were relevant, the brother would have come personally. He surprises her by asking the reason why she didn't open and read the letter herself before delivering it. The heir repeats calmly that she could have read everything if she was so worried about the content. She widens her eyes, astonished, and questions how a simple servant would have the courage to do something so daring. With a mysterious smile, the young man ends the subject and asks calmly for some tea to be prepared. Hot tea is served in the cup, and the servant servant asks humbly if she can also drink together with the master. She takes the porcelain cup to her lips to take a small sip of the still quite hot drink. The young man compliments the wonderful aroma of the drink while the two share a rare moment of tranquility. The girl holds the thoughtful cup, trying to unravel the true meaning behind his words. Suddenly, a memory surges in her mind, making all the pieces of that puzzle fit together. She recalls that the master always forced her to eat the entire meal she herself prepared first. An expression of panic surges on her face upon realizing that it was all to avoid a possible poisoning. She concludes that the real reason for cooking together was the fact that the heir did not trust her in any way. The servant is quite shaken upon, accepting that to him she is just another person who doesn't deserve trust. She stands up suddenly and confesses with sadness that she is indeed just another unwanted intruder in his life. The young heir just agrees with her statement in silence, without diverting attention from his reading. The young woman apologizes for the late report and for having made up the excuse that he would not receive visitors. She laments, calling herself a fool for pretending to know everything and ignoring the things that are really important. She admits that she spent her life focused only on surviving without ever understanding the real meaning of serving someone. With a quick movement, she kneels before the main heir in a sign of deep respect. She bows her head to the floor and asks sincerely if he would accept her absolute loyalty from now on. The young heir observes her in silence with a thoughtful look, analyzing the sincerity of her proposal. He asks if she will keep that oath even in the face of the worst dangers and dark secrets of the future. With unwavering determination shining in her eyes, she answers firmly that she is certainly capable of that. The young man changes the subject and asks what she knows about the health status of the family's current patriarch. The young man reveals that his father is actually in a coma due to poisoning and that the clan is ruled by a supreme council. He reveals that this is why he always took care of his own food and has already suffered countless assassination attempts. The girl turns pale with astonishment before that terrible revelation and confesses that she can barely imagine the danger. The young man warns that this is just a fraction of the family's darkness and asks if she still wishes to serve him. She bows again, begging him to allow her to dedicate her entire life to his service. Faced with the answer, he hands her the burnt letter and orders her to read the last page of that document. The sheet says that if she confesses everything honestly, she must be treated only as a mere beast of burden. She trembles with dread upon reading the final recommendation that she should be silently eliminated if she failed. The young woman begins to cry upon realizing that the butler, whom she considered a father, actually planned her death. The young heir takes a sip of his tea and asks if she finally understood the reason for showing the letter. Wiping the tears from her face, she answers yes, confirming that she understood the painful message of her lord. The girl states that the heir did that to show her in practice what the true meaning of loyalty is. With a slight smile, the young man says he considers loyalty a madness capable of making parents abandon their children. He stares at her from top to bottom imposingly, asking if she still wants to swear loyalty to him. With flushed cheeks, she answers that the choice is his, but that in any case, she will remain faithful. Satisfied with the girl's sincere answer, the young master finally opens a very warm and gentle smile. Night falls under the imposing main pavilion, while the full moon shines intensely in the starry sky. Sitting at the wooden table, the young woman begins to tell the story of her family who managed a commercial guild. She remembers with affection when she lived in harmony with her eldest sister and her loving father in the past. The little girl smiled joyfully without having the slightest clue about the terrible tragedies that would come in the future. Everything changed when the guild went through financial problems and they resorted to a terrible loan from Loan Shark. She explains that the low interest rates of the beginning were just a cruel trap to extort 10 times more money. Due to the accumulated debts that became impossible to pay, the two sisters ended up sold as slaves. The heir asks if the sister was really talented, and she confirms proudly that she was always brilliant. A glimpse shows the eldest sister who wears an eye patch and now resides, established in the city of Luoyang. She reveals with pride that her sister currently works as an extremely famous and respected informant. The heir focuses his attentive gaze, finding the girl's sister's mysterious new profession very intriguing. The servant reveals that she received a letter from her sister saying she had finally found the culprit for the clan's ruin. With a furious look, she confesses that she will never forget the name of the muscular man who caused all this disgrace. The young heir interrupts his sip of tea, surprised to hear that nickname, and repeats the name in a thoughtful way. The young master confirms if her sister really works as an informant, and the girl answers yes. He drinks his tea quietly and suggests that they both travel to visit her sister the very next day. The girl's eyes shine with immense joy, and she asks, quite surprised, if that is really true. The young man smiles gently and says she will have plenty of time to catch up on everything with her sister. The next day, she appears beautifully dressed and warns that she is totally ready to start the trip. The young master analyzes her with attention and asks if those simple clothes are really her best option. Finding the clothes too simple for the heir's servant, he shouts out the gate, calling the new watchman. The man approaches, complaining quietly about the nickname of doorman, but the heir tells him to shut up. The heir orders him to run to the inner courtyard and immediately bring the best luxury women's clothes. The warrior grinds his teeth, infuriated at the young man's audacity for being treated like a mere errand boy. The master threatens him, saying he will demote him to manure cleaner if he doesn't go to fulfill the order immediately. Dying of fear of receiving an even worse punishment, the guard runs off in a dash to fetch the clothes. The servant is impressed by the soldier's absurd speed, while the man laments his situation. The warrior runs furiously, cursing the heir and hoping that his transfer request comes out soon. The guard returns upset and warns that the pavilion staff refused the request without giving further explanations. The master is thoughtful while the servant suggests that they leave soon at once before it gets too late. He suddenly puts his hand inside, the sleeve of the cloak, remembering a very valuable object he kept. He hits a heavy golden seal directly against the forehead of the frightened soldier, who lets out a scream. The warrior stands totally shocked upon seeing the object, and the master tells him to go back there to show the golden seal. The young man kicks the guard's rear, telling him to stop talking and run soon to fulfill his royal task. The girl stands with her eyes widened in surprise and asks, stammering, if that object would be the royal seal. The young master confirms, smirking, that that golden object is indeed the patriarch's official seal. The servant stands completely scared and questions the reason why the young man possesses the clan's most sacred seal. With a sarcastic smile, the young man answers that, with the father sick, no one but him would have the right to keep it. The golden seal is a gift from the former emperor that represents the absolute supreme power over the entire clan. The master tells her not to worry and confesses that he always used the valuable seal to buy mere books and paper. The servant stands totally without reaction to his informal answer and lets out a nervous laugh of pure disbelief. The housekeeper, Wu Huayan, arrives accompanied by several servants bringing the orders and greets the young heir. The young man points out mockingly that things would have been easier if they had cooperated from the beginning. Trembling with rage for having been bent by the official seal, the housekeeper says goodbye forcedly and leaves. A huge amount of chests full of beautiful luxury silk dresses is left in the pavilion courtyard. The girl stares at those luxury clothes with shyness and says that such expensive pieces do not match her social class. The young man states seriously that from now on she will need to wear noble attire quite frequently. She clenches her own hands with force, feeling her heart fill with deep gratitude for his affection. She bows respectfully and accepts the gift with a very soft and very moved tone of voice. The grand city of Luoyang appears busy and full of life as the main commercial center of the region. The local citizens observe with curiosity the arrival of the nobles through the busy streets of that huge village. The stunning beauty of the girl dressed in luxury clothes catches the attention of all the people around. The residents whisper, astonished, upon noting that the escort guard belongs to the famous sword-fighting family. The escort guard walks suspicious, observing the crowd and alert to any danger in the middle of the way. He mutters irritably about having become a babysitter and warns suddenly that he needs to move away to solve something personal. The master questions him indignant, asking if he really plans to leave his lord unprotected on the street. To the soldier's surprise, the heir simply tells him to stay behind and focus only on protecting the servant. The warrior blinks confused and realizes, frightened, that the young master master vanished from there without leaving a single trace. Furious, the guard warns the girl that she will have to follow alone because he needs to go after the runaway master. She smiles gently and tells him not to worry because she knows that nothing bad can happen to the young man. The soldier runs as fast as he can, cursing against the absurd speed of movement of his lord. He begins to jump from roof to roof through the city skies in a desperate attempt to find the young man. He uses his energy to try to locate him, but doesn't find even a single trace of the heir's presence. Totally exhausted and confused, the soldier wonders what would be the true hidden identity of that young man. The long-haired young master arrives before a large wooden door under the silence of the night. The wooden door opens slowly, revealing a small slit of bluish light that cuts through the darkness. He takes the first step inside the location while a mysterious voice announces his arrival there. The injured elder invites him to enter his humble residence very respectfully. The man is startled to see the courtyard of his house totally destroyed and messy by the invaders. He realizes, outraged, that the terrible henchmen of the Black Bones sect passed through there as well. In complete panic, the elder runs desperate through the courtyard, shouting and looking for his wife. The woman appears running with the scared children upon seeing her husband injured and covered in blood. Relieved to see that everyone is fine, he hugs his beloved family, crying with great emotion. The young heir observes in silence that emotional reunion in the middle of the destroyed courtyard. The woman is startled upon focusing her eyes on the young man and recognizes him as someone very important. The father kneels immediately, begging him to spare his life and not cut his limbs. The wife and little children also bow, crying and asking for mercy for the patriarch of the home. The elder soon realizes the confusion and warns that, in fact, that young master saved his life. Surprised by the revelation, the woman calms down and realizes she committed a terrible misunderstanding. She bows with deep respect and thanks the young man immensely for having protected her husband. The entire family bows united before him, demonstrating extreme gratitude for his noble attitude. With a humble smile, the elder invites the benefactor to enter and accept a cup of hot tea. The heir accepts the invitation and decides to receive that simple hospitality for a few moments. The man serves the drink, worried that the low quality of the tea leaves might offend the young man. The young master takes a sip and compliments the drink, saying it has an excellent aroma. He thanks the kindness and asks about the actions of the Black Bones sect against that family. The elder explains that the men work for a cruel group led by the ruthless Gyumju. He says that they run gambling houses and are an extremely gigantic organization. The heir questions him about the reason for him having gone to one of those dangerous gambling houses. The man says they force people to gamble to increase debts uncontrollably. The young man asks if the elder possesses any more useful information about that sect's leadership. The man laments, saying ordinary people like them know almost nothing about the criminals. The young heir closes his eyes in silence and says he understands their situation perfectly. He thanks them for the warm reception and warns calmly that he needs to continue his path. The elder asks him not to leave like that and demands to know his name to repay the great help. The family insists for him not to leave, empty-handed, and asks him to accept a gift. The young man looks back askance, demonstrating he has become curious about that sincere offer. In an empty room, several handcrafted masks are thrown on the floor, and one of them glows in a unique way. The young master enters the silent room and walks slowly in the direction of that white mask. He holds the object and warns that he will accept the mask as full payment for having saved his life. Upon seeing the heir's choice, the elder widens his eyes and lets out a sigh of extreme astonishment. The man reveals quite apprehensively that he was not the one who crafted that mask. He points out that the object lacks openings for the eyes and that its finish is unfinished. He explains that that was the final work of his late father, who went insane in his final years. The young man analyzes the details of the unfinished piece and wonders the real reason for the elder having made it. The man retorts, saying it would be impossible to decipher the real motives of a madman's mind. With an astute smile, the heir asks if something serious happened before the father lost his sanity. Shocked by the precision, the elder says he had an extremely talented older brother. He says his brother was falsely accused of a crime and taken hastily to prison. To pay the bribe demanded by the inspector, they needed money from the sect's loan shark. Despite all the effort and money paid, his brother returned home only as a corpse. He tells, crying, that the corrupt inspector himself was the executioner responsible for the execution. The elder reveals that, in fact, everything was part of a futile bet made by corrupt officials. One of them offered a masterpiece of his father, and the heir asks, curious, what happened next. The man explains that the loser of the bet was furious and incriminated his older brother out of pure revenge. The corrupt inspector forged several serious accusations against his father, who ended up beaten by the guard. To ensure the old artisan would never create masks again, the soldiers crushed his two hands. The son was forced to carry his father back home, totally debilitated and without strength. Locked in his workshop, the old artisan spent his final days isolated from the world until he passed away. The protagonist questions him if, even after hearing all this story, he still hasn't understood the mask. The artisan kneels, begging for the young master to explain to him the mystery of his father's final work. The heir looks at the unfinished piece and states that it could never have been done perfectly. He reveals that the old artisan had already totally lost his sanity and stopped feeding himself. Without the use of his hands, he carved all the wood using only the toes of his feet covered in blood. The only force that kept that body alive was the pure hatred accumulated by so much suffering. As soon as he made the last carving in the wood, the old artisan took his last breath of life. It was in this tragic way that a powerful cursed artifact ended up being born in the world of shadows. The soul filled with resentment of the deceased artisan could not rest and guided the young man to that location. The heir walks, imposingly, feeling that that tragic energy of hatred now belongs to him. The young man puts the mask on his face and feels an overwhelming purple energy envelop his body. He notes that the family of the late artisan finally sleeps in peace without the torment of the past. The young man understands that the mask lacked holes for the eyes by a direct choice of the creator. He decided not to carve the eyes because he simply could no longer bear to look at this cruel world. The protagonist lets out a sinister laugh from behind the mask, feeling the immense power of hatred. The evil aura expands violently while the young man tunes himself to the fury of the deceased. The scene changes suddenly to a dark and damp alley located in the great city of Luoyang. A mysterious man receives a new skull tattoo made very detailed on his back. The tattoo artist comments, laughing, that the muscular warrior must have murdered someone else recently. He displays a proud smile and asks if the work was to the liking of his powerful client. The giant, with blindfolded eyes, orders harshly for the tattoo artist to stop and leave them alone there. Suddenly, the wooden ceiling collapses violently with a frightening crash that echoes in the room. Several masked assassins invade the location, falling directly upon the powerful warrior. The giant smiles, demonstrating he was already waiting patiently for that surprise attack. One of the invaders with bright red eyes advances, wielding his sword with extreme speed. The giant activates his immense spiritual power, emanating a frightening orange glow from his eye. He lands a devastating punch that crushes the first opponent's face in a brutal way. Another assassin jumps from behind, trying to strike a fatal blow with his sharp blade. The warrior blocks the attack with ease, demonstrating superhuman physical strength. He throws the opponent against the wooden floor with an impact that destroys the entire structure. The warrior spins his body, delivering an overwhelming blow that throws the enemies far away. He advances rapidly upon the remaining opponents with heavy and very violent steps. Surrounded by more warriors, he displays a sadistic smile, ready to continue the massacre. He crushes the invaders' faces one by one without demonstrating any kind of mercy. The bodies of the defeated assassins remain lying on the floor of the totally destroyed room. The warrior mocks the fallen enemies, saying they are nothing but insignificant worms. He laughs aloud, commenting to the elder that now he will need to get 4 more skull tattoos. The older brother appears carrying a piece of wood and compliments the damage done by the youngest. The giant is surprised by the visit, and the brother warns that he heard strange rumors from the henchman. He asks, curious about what it is, making the older brother focus his serious look. The man tells that the shop of that artisan whose masks they destroyed in the past is back in business. He explains that the family was eliminated, but that a mysterious pale young man took over the place. The giant stares at the surprised brother and wonders who the fragile-looking young man would be. He rages upon thinking that someone dared to reopen a shop confiscated by his sect leader. The two giant brothers walk decided through the streets, ready to punish the cheeky invader. The two giant brothers finally enter the mask workshop under the silence of that dawn. They catch sight of the young heir sitting with his back turned and question if that young man would be the scholar. The oldest confirms, saying that he looks much younger than he imagined in the face of the gossip. The protagonist continues carving a small Buddha statue without giving the slightest attention to the invader. The two criminals begin to walk imposingly in the direction of the table to confront the young man. The strongest opens a sadistic smile and demands to know where the former mask artisan fled. The young heir turns his face slowly, revealing that he is already wearing the mysterious white mask. The giant retreats, scared, feeling a shiver and an extremely sinister presence coming from the young man. The younger brother approaches the table threateningly, demanding that the young man respond to the elder. The young man just moves his head slightly, maintaining a totally cold and unshakable posture. He places his hands with delicacy over the small sacred sculpture he just created. From behind the mask, the heir asks, in a mysterious way, if they know the true face of the Buddha. The two brothers look at each other totally confused and irritated by that question so meaningless. He rises calmly, commenting that it would be a waste of time to discuss sacred things with worms. The young man holds his wooden sculpture under the faint blue light that enters through the workshop windows. Furious with the mockery, the two brothers decide to go for physical aggression to rip out answers. The strongest advances, laughing aloud, saying that a weakling like that won't take even a single punch. However, the man suddenly stops walking upon noting something bizarre on the shelves around. He remembers that his henchmen had totally destroyed that shop and stolen everything of value. Upon seeing the arranged shelves, he wonders, scared, if that is some type of black magic. The other brother pushes the wooden back door, looking for the young man who disappeared from sight. He stands petrified upon hearing a demonic and frightening laugh echoing from the middle of the shadows. Several black claws of hungry spirits emerge from the wooden floor and surround his leg. The giant lets out a desperate scream of dread upon feeling the terrible dark energy suck him. A gigantic hand made of pure darkness advances rapidly to grab the helpless man. The warrior screams in agony while the shadows tighten his body with overwhelming force. He tries to break free desperately, but the black claw tightens his neck, suffocating his voice. The man is dragged with extreme violence into the deep darkness of that room. The younger brother runs desperate, trying to save his companion who was vanishing into the abyss. He widens his eyes in complete state of shock upon realizing the danger is much greater. A black claw appears from nowhere and holds firmly the heel of the giant who tries to retreat. He is pulled brutally through the floor, screaming in pure desperation and panic in the darkness. The man scratches the wooden ground in the hope of finding a foothold to hold on to. He begs for help in tears, realizing that the force of darkness is totally relentless. A deafening scream of pure terror echoes through the workshop while the shadows consume both. Demonic faces appear amidst the purple fog, totally devouring the vital energy of the villains. Sinister laughs echo through the entire room while the ancient souls find revenge. The artisan's terrible mask glows in the dark, showing that the sinners received their karma. Under the evening light, the young man sits in silence in the middle of the woods to carve his statue. He analyzes the work closely and thinks that just imitating the external form of the Buddha is not enough. The young man wonders what would be the true physiognomy of the deity he met. With a slight smile on his face, the young master finally declares that his great work is ready. The Buddha statue reveals a totally smooth face without features, just like the mask of the deceased. Before the tomb, he leaves the sculpture and wishes that all the artisans' souls rest in peace. The heir walks determined, declaring that the Black Bones sect will pay for all the crimes. He states with a sharp look that the only resistance that will remain to the enemies will be to cry. The scene changes to the grand pavilion of Luoyang, glowing under the beautiful blue sky of the day. The eldest sister of Yunga, who wears an eye patch, explains that the clan faces political chaos. She says that the power of the successors grows while the influence of the great patriarch decays. The informant reveals, worried, that new rumors about a terrible poisoning appeared in the clan. Yunga Yung-ah takes her tea quietly, commenting that the clan's gossip is nothing but rumors without meaning. The sister smiles provocatively, saying that she still hasn't won the master's trust. Yung-ah ignores the obvious provocation and continues drinking her tea, maintaining a calm posture. She places the cup on the table, warning that she will not fall for the silly provocations of her own sister. The sister throws all responsibility for the current chaos of the Sword Clan on the young master's shoulders. Yung-ah gets slightly irritated and defends her lord, saying that he still hasn't taken active leadership. The sister crosses her arms with disdain, questioning the reason for him still not becoming the official leader. The servant stares at the older sister with a look full of fury and resentment for her audacity. The older sister confesses that she was shocked to learn of her affiliation change to the pavilion. Yung-ah deduces thoughtfully that her sister received this information at the same time as the other spies. Holding her tobacco pipe, the older one says she doesn't understand the reason for her supporting the guy. She smiles, calling the heir a swordless man, leaving the mood in the room extremely tense. Yung-ah changes her countenance and orders coldly that her sister never repeat that offensive title again. Surprised by the sudden imposingness of the servant, the older one decides to retreat and apologizes for the comment. She ponders that the young master is not ordinary, but remembers that the great patriarch has been isolated for 10 years. Walking through the room, she points out that the heir's rivals managed to gather immense military forces. She questions what the young man could do now, and hears the sister answer that it is enough to watch to see. Suddenly, the beautiful golden eyes of Yung-ah glow intensely upon feeling an imminent. A violent crash shakes the entire structure of the pavilion, scaring the two women in the room. The wooden gates are totally destroyed, revealing the sudden invasion of enemies. Several muscular henchmen invade the location, shouting orders to capture the owner of that pavilion. The two sisters are in shock upon recognizing the symbols of the dangerous Black Bones faction. Yung-ah knows that attacking a neutral information organization in broad daylight is a suicide mission. One of the invaders jumps in the direction of the older sister, while the servant shouts in total desperation. The man extends his hand with sharp nails to capture the informant, who stands paralyzed with dread. Meanwhile, the scene changes to a busy street fair in the peaceful city of Luoyang. The guard with a scar on his face finds the young master and asks desperate where he was. The protagonist stares at the man with disdain, questioning the reason for him being shouting that way. The servant explains, distressed, that he was worried to see the servant Yung-ah walking totally alone. The young man opens an enigmatic smile, asking if the servant would really be running some danger. The guard stands very confused without understanding the reason for his master to remain calm and eating his snack. The protagonist just smirks, knowing exactly what the outcome of that confrontation will be. Back at the pavilion, Yung-ah takes the iron pipe from her sister, decided to use it as a weapon. She performs an extremely fast and precise movement, delivering a swift blow to the tattooed invader. The iron tip of the pipe hits squarely the neck of the tattooed henchman, who screams in pain. The man collapses unconscious on the room floor, raising a huge curtain of dust as he falls. The other criminals retreat, scared, without understanding how an ordinary woman managed to knock down the ally. Yung-ah assumes an impeccable combat posture, catching the attention of all the warriors in the room. The leader of the invaders smiles, saying that acting that way, without being a warrior, is a terrible idea. The older sister sweats cold, worried, knowing that there is a limit to the girl's physical ability. Even surrounded by dangerous armed fighters, the servant refuses to retreat a single step. The informant shouts the sister's name, distressed by the terrible fate that awaits them in that room. Clutching the iron handle, Yung-ah asks in her thoughts how long she will need to hold on there. The sister answers that she needs to resist for 15 minutes until the pavilion traps activate. One of the warriors with bright red eyes says the time for warnings is over and advances against the servant. The henchmen run together, shouting that they themselves brought that terrible fate upon them. An extremely swift punch is struck in the direction of the girl's face, who remains concentrated. Her golden eyes glow, and she manages to predict with precision each movement and breath of the enemy. With a perfect dodge, dodge, she avoids the punch attack while preparing her own counterattack. She drives the metallic tip of the pipe directly into the aggressor's throat, who screams, surprise. The henchman advances, furious, delivering a violent punch, but the girl dodges with great ease. The leader of the invaders realizes that she is not ordinary and orders, shouting for no one to hold back. Young-ah performs a quick movement and spins her body, delivering a precise blow against two enemies. She hits the iron pipe on the adversary's temple, who screams in pain while the sister watches. The informant is completely impressed before the immense combat talent of her younger sister. She finds it unbelievable that Young-ah fights so well against elite warriors even without training martial art. The tattooed henchman stands infuriated and draws his sword, swearing at the girl with much hatred in his eyes. He jumps with the blade raised while the older sister shouts, desperate, for Young-ah to take care. The villain attacks with a sadistic smile, believing piously that that blow will seal the young woman's fate. With superhuman speed, Young-ah avoids the sword and counterattacks, leaving the man in shock. She spins, delivering a series of quick blows that hit the vital points of three opponents at once. With a light touch of the pipe, she finishes the movement against the chest of the last enemy standing. The opponent falls, totally knocked out to the floor, while she breathes deeply, recovering her strength. The sister asks if she learned fencing in the clan, but Young-ah says she just observed others training. The informant sweats cold and stands disbelieving upon realizing the sister learned to fight just by watching. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the hall where dozens of henchmen are already defeated on the floor. A new mysterious figure enters the room, making firm steps that break all the silence of the environment. Young-ah recognizes immediately that intimidating voice and turns her face with extreme worry. The beautiful and dangerous Geumju enters accompanied by her bodyguard, complaining about the weakness of her men. She displays a mocking smile, commenting ironically on the terrible hospitality of that location. The leader orders, irritated, that all her incompetent and defeated henchmen leave there immediately. The owner of the pavilion warns her seriously, saying that that invasion will bring severe consequences. Geumju ignores the warning and complains about not having received even a simple cup of tea as a visitor. The informant retorts, saying that she is nothing but an invader, but the blonde just mocks her intelligence. Geumju smiles, saying that if she were a real enemy, they would not be there talking totally unharmed. With a nod from her, the elderly bodyguard throws a small metallic object with extreme speed. The projectile grazes the informant's cheek, demonstrating the immense precision of the warrior. A trickle of blood runs down the woman's face, who maintains her firm expression without hesitation. The villain compliments her courage and wishes her own subordinates had half of such audacity. Geumju comments thoughtfully that her men have been ambushed very frequently lately. The owner of the pavilion just answers that this is the natural price to pay for aggressive expansion. The villain says she is sure the pavilion is behind the ambushes and that she acted based on her intuition. She asks if the informant doesn't find it strange to have been discovered just when the location was unprotected. The blonde reveals victoriously that she finally found a source of information much more powerful and reliable. The owner of the pavilion asks if this new source really pointed to her as the mind behind everything. The villain denies with an enigmatic smile and begins to remove a mysterious object from inside her clothes. She displays a bronze medallion, stating that it belongs to the most influential clan of all the plains. Young-ah widens her eyes in complete state of shock upon recognizing the official seal of the sword family. Geumju smiles upon noting she recognized the bronze object, and the informant demands to know the origin of the seal. The servant stares at the medallion in complete silence, feeling an immense tension take over her thoughts. The blonde explains that with the support of that rich family, she doesn't need to worry about any Suddenly, the quiet voice of the young master echoes from the top of the window, asking if he can see the medallion. Young-ah turns her face quickly, surprised by his totally unexpected arrival there. The guard with a scar emerges right behind, panting, commenting on the time limit of the location's defenses. He complains tiredly, questioning the reason for the master having climbed the window instead of using the normal door. The heir answers, smiling, that entering that way by climbing walls seems much cooler. He jumps inside the hall with calm and extends his hand, demanding for the villain to let him analyze the object. Gumju observes him, incredulous, questioning if the guy really thinks she will hand over the medallion for free. The elderly bodyguard takes a step forward, irritated, and demands to know who the daring person is who dares challenge them. The heir points to his own noble clothes and answers smiling if they cannot see who he is. Gyeomju's guards disdain the heir, asking if they should be afraid of a mere soldier. The guardian, with a scar, remains with his arms crossed, listening to the mockery with total tranquility. The protagonist smiles and warns the enemies that despite his simple clothes, he is a great master. The henchmen break into laughter, mocking the young man's statement and poking fun at his skills. The heir sighs with a light smile and orders calmly for his soldier to bring the medallion back. With eyes glowing in a frightening red tone, the guardian accepts the order promptly from his lord. He takes the first step in the direction of the opposing group, making the wooden floor creak under his feet. The warriors of Gyeomju feel an overwhelming spiritual pressure and begin to sweat cold with pure dread. In the second step, the guardian passes quietly by the henchmen, who are paralyzed by extreme fear. Trembling with dread, the opponents cannot even manage to sketch any defense reaction before that order. Upon taking a third firm step, the warrior arrives right in front of the table where the blonde leader is sitting. Gumju widens her eyes and feels cold sweat running upon realizing the frightening speed of the man. In a fraction of a second, he moves like a lightning bolt and yanks the bronze medallion directly from her hand. He lands firmly back beside his lord, making the entire room tremble with the impact. The guardian bows and hands over respectfully the recovered bronze medallion into the young master's hands. Gumju looks horrified at her own trembling hand, realizing she faced a true master. The protagonist holds the object with curiosity, commenting in a relaxed way that he wishes to analyze it. He confirms with great certainty to the servant that the valuable bronze piece is indeed totally original. The heir explains that the medallion represents a blood pact and eternal loyalty of the Sword family. The older sister agrees in silence, remembering that the seal was always the symbol of absolute trust. The young man throws the object upward, commenting with disdain that nowadays it turned into just a toy. Gyeomju takes the medallion back and guarantees that the seal still protects her group from the family swords. The heir admits that breaking the medallion agreement would destroy all the credibility built by the clan. The blonde sketches a sarcastic smile upon realizing she is dealing with the famous swordless young man of the clan. Staring at her with his deep blue eyes, the guy introduces himself calmly, revealing his true name. Gumju lets out a mocking laugh, pretending to have been scared by the imposing revelation of the young man. She mocks the heir, asking what a weak guy does there instead of continuing to ruin his own clan. The blonde questions if he plans to go out into the world just to besmirch his family's respected name. Irritated by the insults, the owner of the pavilion hits her iron pipe against the wooden table with force. She stares at the villain threateningly and orders Gyeomju to be very careful to dictate her word. Yong-ah intervenes firmly, defending that the young master still belongs to the powerful sword family. The blonde turns and mocks, questioning if that coward guy really looks like a great warrior. Gumju lifts the medallion laughing and says her true ally is the second young master heir of the clan. Suddenly, the villain interrupts her own speech upon focusing her red eyes on the features of Yong-ah. She stands thoughtful for a few moments, analyzing carefully the striking features of the young servant. The blonde points to her smiling upon realizing that that is the runaway servant of whom the second brother spoke. Yong-ah remains in absolute silence with a very serious expression before the villain's accusation. Gyeomju finds fun in all that coincidence and says she is very happy to meet the girl personally. She asks the reason for the young woman having rejected becoming a concubine of the second brother to serve a weak god. Yong-ah retorts, irritated, demanding that the criminal does not dare utter any insult against her master. The servant states that a vulgar person like Gyeomju cannot speak the name of someone so noble. The blonde gets irritated and remembers that the guy is considered by everyone in his clan as a lazy coward. She says that even being a coward, he is still considered superior to people without lineage like them. The title of swordless young man was always a reason for joke and humiliation by all the central plain. Gyeomju challenges the servant to say something in defense of her master if she really has any good excuse. Jung-ah feels immense rage but realizes frustrated that any word said now would be useless. She laments in silence for feeling totally weak and incapable of defending the honor of her lord. It is at this moment of great anguish that the young master places his hand on the girl's shoulder, asking for calm. The heir orders Gyeomju to stop talking, warning that she is dealing with his dear personal servant. The blonde villain turns to leave, claiming that conversation lost all grace for her. The older sister stares at the enemy extremely seriously while trying to contain the rage she feels in her chest. Gyeomju smiles mockingly and warns that next time the futile young master will not be able to save their lives. The informant observes the criminal leave in silence while whispering her name with much hatred in her look. The blonde says goodbye sarcastically, telling them to take care while she retreats from the location with all her guard. Jung-ah trembles with hatred beside her older sister, feeling humiliated by the terrible words of mockery from the blonde. Feeling the weight of her weakness, the young servant falls to her knees before her lord and begs for forgiveness, crying a lot. Suddenly, Jung-ah ends up fainting out of exhaustion, and her sister runs desperate to hold her before she falls to the ground. The young servant remains totally unconscious and very pale due to the immense physical fatigue she accumulated during the day. Lying in a comfortable bed, the girl is examined closely by the young master while her guardian watches everything. The warrior clenches his fist, infuriated to see mere criminals stain in such a dirty way the honor of his family. He laments in silence, thinking that things would be different if his master used the power of his true title. The soldier lowers his head, apologizing for not having permission to massacre all those insolent criminals. The young master stares at him calmly and says he doesn't need to apologize because he fulfilled his duty brilliantly. He advises the guard to return to the main house before he ends up being hunted together with him because of the medallion. The man stands totally surprised and tries to argue, saying his main obligation there is to protect the young master. The heir retorts coldly, stating that he should not risk his life for someone to whom he never swore loyalty. Without arguments before the wise words of his lord, the guard just lowers his head and accepts with much sadness. The young man extends his hand, handing a mysterious envelope to the warrior, who accepts it with quite some respect and doubt. The heir explains that the paper is an official order declaring that the escort mission ended and he should return. The guard clenches the document in his hand and agrees sadly, knowing he needs to obey the direct instruction. He walks back through the corridor, irritated with himself for feeling so weak and powerless before the danger. The older sister enters the room and asks, worried, about the young woman's health state while the master examines her. The guy questions her if she didn't hear that the sister is just sleeping, but the informant still demonstrates much distrust. She asks, suspicious, the reason for him taking so long to be able to verify her sister's pulse. Ignoring the question, the guy stares at her seriously and asks if she didn't bring the information about the Black Bones sect. The woman demands to know the truth about her sister before handing over the secret documents she gathered with so much effort. She goes into panic upon hearing from the master that Jung-ah is actually suffering from a serious and dangerous health ailment. The guy opens a sarcastic smile and explains that extreme fatigue is a serious disease capable of taking lives silently. Irritated, for realizing it was just a joke, she demands to know the real reason for him wanting the data of that terrible sect. Upon leafing through the reports, the heir notes that the informant is planning something very dangerous against local criminal. The woman retorts coldly, saying that her plans are not the business of a weak young master like him. The two exchange extremely intense looks, and the heir orders very firmly for her to stop with that foolishness. The heir remembers that Gyeomju's medallion is real and asks if she herself shouldn't know the immense power of that sect. The sister clenches her fists, furious, questioning how he could just stand watching all that without doing anything until now. Faced with the tense mood in the room, the master suggests they continue that serious conversation outside under the moonlight. In the courtyard at night, the informant asks rhetorically where the largest and most powerful merchant family is. She continues questioning which is the most important martial lineage, and the young man answers that it is his own family. With much rage, she complains that the Sword Clan preferred to ally with criminals while the people of Luoyang died of starvation. She accuses the Black Bones sect of sucking all the blood of citizens while other mafias grew without limits. The guy reveals with a dark look that the main family not only ignored everything but is using the sect to their advantage. Shocked by the revelation, she shouts, infuriated, questioning what he had been doing while all that happened in the clan. The informant walks away, irritated, saying that Gyumju's harsh words of mockery against him were totally correct. She accuses him of using his order of reclusion as a mere comfortable excuse not to do absolutely anything in life. The woman decides to leave, irritated, saying for him not to meddle in the life of who is willing to die for a just cause. With a frightening tone of voice, the young master orders her never to dare cross Gyumju's path again. She stops, scared, and he begins to tell an ancient legend about two sisters who shared an unbreakable loyalty. He tells that the older sister was full of justice and decided to fight the criminals who destroyed her homeland. She risked everything beside her brave battle companions, but all of them ended up being brutally murdered. Upon discovering the terrible death of her beloved protector, the younger sister, who was extremely talented, ended up going crazy. Consumed by pure hatred, she set off for a bloody revenge, hunting and eliminating all the murderers of her sister. The younger sister ended up being hunted and executed as a public enemy because the enemies she faced were too strong. The informant trembles with cold sweat and asks, totally in shock, about what exactly the guy is trying to say with that. He laments with disdain, saying that those brave women didn't manage to even leave their names or legacies in the world. The young master explains that in the story invented by other sects, they were labeled only as great traitors. Still very scared by the tone of the conversation, she confesses with shyness that she doesn't understand the real meaning of his words. He asks if she is willing to continue her personal revenge, knowing that it will bring countless innocent sacrifices. The heir warns seriously that her plans for justice will inevitably cause the death of many common people. Horrified by the terrible possibility suggested, the informant shouts, desperate, stating that something like that will never happen. The guy emanates a strong energy and explains that to change the course of history, an absurd amount of blood must be spilled. The young heir slowly covers his own face while starting to put on his mysterious and frightening wooden mask. The woman widens her eyes and lets out a shout of astonishment upon recognizing the legendary and frightening mask of the old artisan. The guy remembers when he dreamed of changing the world until he realized it was all just a silly childhood fantasy. Enveloped by a dense, dark smoke, he takes heavy steps that make the courtyard floor tremble with an overwhelming spiritual pressure. The young master laments that his social prestige and his lineage of birth made his dream of peace impossible. He reveals that he tried to abandon all his covetousness to live free like the wind, but destiny ended up charging its price. The masked one warns that he failed to change his own destiny, but states that the future of the two sisters hasn't been totally decided yet. The informant stands paralyzed with dread upon feeling the terrible and suffocating evil energy that begins to emanate from the guy. With his gaze glowing in a strong purple tone, he promises to observe closely to see if their destinies will cross. The heir warns that he will walk the path of darkness, where he will create a true mountain of corpses and an ocean of blood, under the immense shadow of a colossal demon of black energy. She prays in silence that they never face each other as enemies. Alone in the courtyard, she breathes very heavily and wonders in shock what the real identity of that young master would be. The scene cuts to the dark slums of Luoyang, where unscrupulous people are easily recruited by the dangerous faction. At the entrance of the Black Bones sect base, a bald and very muscular warrior waits patiently under the moonlight. The man with skull tattoos smiles anxious, planning his promotion, when a mysterious voice calls him by surprise. The giant turns his face quickly, letting out a confused grumble upon noticing that someone approached without making a sound. The masked guy emerges floating amidst a strong purple energy and asks calmly if that is a sect branch. The warrior mocks his fragile appearance and orders the intruder to leave there immediately before he loses his patience. From behind the white mask, the heir smirks and answers quietly that he didn't come there to ask for a job. The bald one says he is in a good mood and offers a bizarre test, telling the guy to take 2 physical blows to be accepted. With an extremely cruel smile, the giant prepares to fight, promising a letter of recommendation if he survives. The young master activates the purple glow of his left eye and calls the opponent a fool for not understanding the gravity of the situation. Furious with the boy's audacity, the henchman delivers a violent punch, demanding to know the real reason for him being at that location. The masked guy moves with absurd speed, dodging easily the crushing attack of the tattooed giant. He emerges floating right above the adversary's arm, commenting that he will reveal his true objective out of pure kindness. The heir grabs the bald man from behind with extreme force and announces he came there just to devour all of them. A terrible dark energy begins to be drained from the opponent's body directly into the young master's palm. The guy raises his arms, initiating a banquet of pure terror while the giant's vital force is totally consumed. The warrior screams, desperate, feeling his powers being sucked mercilessly by the claws of that creature. The masked one assumes a demonic posture and orders, laughing for the man to start singing and screaming in pain for him to hear. With an extremely violent blow, the heir throws the opponent against the dirt ground, destroying the entire base entrance. He holds the man by the neck and says sadistically that breathing is the most important part for a good song. The guy crushes the giant's joints, promising to break each of his bones into 3 parts as karma punishment. With a macabre smile revealing sharp teeth from behind the mask, the young master prepares to continue the torture. He jumps nimbly, concentrating all his immense energy of darkness to perform a devastating area attack. The bald one writhes in pain in the middle of the purple flames, letting out his last scream before being totally disintegrated. The young master stares at the charred corpse on the ground and laments mockingly that the man didn't resist the first step. He lets out a loud laugh that echoes frighteningly throughout the quiet courtyard of that criminal branch. The guy's mask begins to merge frighteningly, with his face revealing bizarre glowing eyes and fangs. Hearing the battle noises, several sect guards run desperate in the direction of the courtyard to see what happened. The armed warriors enter panic and demand to know who that monstrous creature of purple energy is that awaits them. The masked young man simply raises his hand calmly and mockingly greets all the enemies present. The soldiers tremble with rage and scream, demanding to know exactly who is the cheeky person behind that sinister mask. They furiously accuse him of causing a massive mess inside one of the sect's most protected branches. The heir replies that they don't need to know his name and coldly invites them to enjoy that blood banquet. A henchman screams, calling the young man crazy, and advances aggressively, delivering a swift blow with his weapon. Another warrior jumps through the air, brandishing his huge metal sword, and screams that the heir is begging to die. The masked man blocks the blow with extreme ease, generating a massive explosion of sparks in the middle of the dark courtyard. Without giving any chance of defense, he grabs the aggressor's face with his claw in a totally relentless. With a devastating impact, he crushes the opponent against the floor, leaving a huge trail of blood through the environment. The defeated enemy's body collapses totally lifeless on the damp ground before the frightened eyes of the other guard. Infuriated by the loss of their ally, the other soldiers scream furiously, ordering them to kill the heir immediately. The young master watches the assault laughing and comments that a good banquet needs a bloody dance to be complete. He moves his hand calmly and commands them to try to fight and resist with all the strength that still remains in their body. An immense storm of purple and dark energy explodes from the young man, violently hitting all the enemies nearby. Several soldiers are struck by black stakes and begin to scream in pure pain as they feel their souls being consumed. The masked man laughs loudly at the destruction, stating that that courtyard has finally turned into the perfect banquet. The guards spit blood and agonize while being brutally impaled by the dark claws emerging from the ground. Purple energy bolts and black claws continue to hunt and tear apart the few survivors who try to flee from there. A frightening pile of bloodied corpses forms rapidly on the destroyed ground of that criminal branch. The heir remains standing in the middle of the dark mist, emanating an evil aura of devastating spiritual power. The young master observes the massacre around him and asks mockingly if all that fun has already ended so quickly. He walks calmly and laments ironically for having finished the battle just when he was beginning to have fun. The young man lifts one of the survivors by the collar, deciding to use his vital force to sate his insatiable hunger. The man begs desperately for mercy, while the masked man analyzes which part of his body he will devour first. He lets out a macabre laugh of pure insanity, deciding the cruel fate he will give to that poor, frightened soldier. Suddenly, an extremely fast and sharp blue energy cut tears through the air toward the young heir's neck. Feeling imminent danger, the young man stops his attack and turns his head quickly to track the origin of the blow. He dodges the slashing attack with a very elegant acrobatic jump, showing impressive combat reflex. A spiky-haired warrior points his bluish sword, calling the young man a monster, and volunteers to face him. The heir calls him a worthless puppet, while the opponent performs a series of quick spins with his sharp blade. Blue and purple sparks cross the entire courtyard the moment the two exchange ferocious energy blows at high speed. One of the fighters steps with extreme force against the stone floor, preparing an even more violent and fast charge. The young master dodges the blow and appears right behind the adversary, maintaining a totally impeccable combat posture. From behind his frightening wooden mask, the young man celebrates upon realizing that he finally found a decent opponent. Under the moonlight, the sword master stares at the masked man suspiciously, feeling the young man's immense spiritual pressure. The warrior points his shining sword and swears to eliminate that terrible monster from his sect once and for all. With an agile movement, he runs in a dash through the destroyed courtyard, leaving only a trail of dust behind. The swordsman jumps, delivering a devastating aerial attack with his magic blade while screaming with much fury. He executes his most powerful technique, releasing several simultaneous blue energy cuts that advance like lightning. The young man blocks the multiple attacks with his hands, generating immense explosions of light that illuminate the entire woods. The masked man just laughs sadistically amidst the explosions, demonstrating that attack had no effect. Enveloped by his black energy, the young man advances rapidly and asks sarcastically if that strength is all he has. Totally exhausted and sweating with nervousness, the warrior grinds his teeth, cursing the heir upon realizing the power difference. The young master delivers an extremely swift claw blow, releasing a wave of cutting purple energy in his direction. The swordsman is hit squarely by the energy blast, being thrown brutally through the air with much violence. He lets out a terrible scream of agony upon feeling his body being torn apart by the destructive force of the heir's blow. The warrior collapses totally defeated and unconscious on the dirt floor, raising a large cloud of dust. Without demonstrating any interest in the fallen enemy, the young master turns around and walks calmly back into the shadow. He lets out a long sigh and laments that the fun ended so quickly just when he was beginning to get excited. The scene focuses on the stairs leading to the sect's secret underground chamber where new mysteries and dangers await him. Heavy footsteps echo slowly through the stone stairs as the masked young man descends into the depths of that dungeon. He turns his face subtly upon feeling a weak, hostile presence hidden at the end of that silent corridor. An enemy soldier appears running by surprise and jumps with his spear, screaming for the masked heir to die right there. With a single quick movement, the young man releases a wave of purple energy that cuts the aggressor mercilessly. The defeated henchman is thrown with extreme violence against the stone floor, breaking several parts of his body. The young master walks slowly through the trail of destruction, feeling that he is about to discover something terrible in there. He arrives at an immense macabre hall where dozens of human bodies are hung by chains over boiling cauldrons. The young man stares at all that bizarre atrocity from behind his white mask, wondering what kind of cursed place that would be. Fallen and bleeding a lot, the surviving guard trembles trembles with dread, begging desperately for the heir not to approach. Ignoring the pleas, the masked heir steps with relentless force on the terrified soldier's injured leg. The man lets out a deafening scream of pure agony, begging for the terrible monster to stop crushing his bones. He agonizes in pain while the young master realizes, horrified, that location resembles a terrible human slaughterhouse. Piles of bones and bodies of innocents show the cruelty of the sect, which did not spare even the lives of defenseless children there. The guard calls him a monster, but the young man retorts coldly, questioning if the atrocities committed there would be something normal. Holding the man by his hair, he hears the criminal mock, saying that all that massacre is just a lucrative business. The villain shouts, infuriated, claiming that they do all that just to survive and ensure their own daily sustenance. With an icy look of pure hatred, the young master channels his dark energy, preparing to deal the final blow. He crushes the criminal's face in an overwhelming way, silencing forever his screams and his absurd justifications. The violent punch destroys the man's skull, generating a frightening crash that echoes through all the walls of the dark dungeon. He finds it ironic to be called crazy for killing bandits, while the sex crimes are treated as mere common business. The heir welcomes a small survivor with affection, covering her eyes and wondering if he or the world has gone crazy. The scene cuts to the luxurious, secret hideout of leader Gyeomju, glowing under the darkness of the city's peaceful night. Relaxing in her luxurious hot spring bath, the blonde villain rests quietly while reflecting on the latest fact. Holding a beautiful red rose in her hands, Gyeomju remembers thoughtfully the swordless young heir she met earlier. She recalls the secret espionage reports, stating that the young master should not leave his pavilion today. This makes her deduce that, in fact, no one within the Sword clan knew the true plans or steps of the young man. She realizes, intrigued, that his calm and imposing posture does not match at all with the fame of a lazy coward he carries. She wonders if the young man is hiding a colossal secret for remaining so calm in a room full of armed warriors. The blonde pushes away the thoughts and orders authoritatively for the butler to heat the water that suddenly began to cool. The butler with a scarred face agrees immediately, swallowing hard before his mistress's intimidating tone of voice. He bows respectfully and warns that he will provide everything necessary for his mistress's comfort right now. The man turns and shouts harshly at the guards, demanding that they quickly bring heat to the mistress's bathtub. Muscular warriors enter, dragging new defenseless prisoners who beg in tears for their own lives. Observing the victims with disdain, the blonde villain complains that today's shipment doesn't seem to be very fresh and healthy. The guard immobilizes a crying girl over the pool, while guaranteeing that they will choose better the city's next target. The criminal gives the direct order to start the ritual, and the young woman screams, desperate, begging for divine mercy. With a quick movement, the soldier lifts his sharp blade, completely ignoring the terrible pleas of the fallen girl. A terrible scream of pain echoes through the room the moment the fatal blow is dealt, spreading fresh blood through the air. The victim's blood begins to gush in abundance, mixing rapidly with the warm water of the large luxury pool. Gyeomju collects the red liquid with her hands, commenting, relieved, that she was worried about her new face wrinkle. She spreads the warm blood of the victim directly over her skin, with a countenance of pure pleasure and extreme madness. Totally covered in red, she lets out a hysterical laugh, feeling rejuvenated by that macabre ritual. Suddenly, a messenger comes running into the temple, bringing an urgent report that one of their bases was destroyed. Already dressed in her red silk robe, Gyeomju turns, scared, in front of the mirror. Upon hearing that terrible news, she stares at the soldier with extreme fury in her eyes, demanding to know immediately who was the cheeky person responsible for that attack. The guard trembles with fear, explaining that they don't know details because all the allies went crazy and died very quickly. The blonde gets enraged, demanding for him to say if any of the surviving victims managed to report any useful information. The henchman explains, sweating cold, that the few survivors spoke only about having seen a terrible demon at the location. Gyeomju finds the rumors about monsters strange until the man reveals that the reports mention the use of a white mask. The villain's look is filled with pure murderous hatred upon hearing the direct mention of the mysterious white mask wearer. The soldier laments, saying that the victims died so quickly that it was impossible to extract a coherent story from them. The blonde concludes thoughtfully that the men probably ended up crossing the path of some true master. The guard remembers apprehensively of when a subordinate offended a master in the past, and their entire branch was annihilated. He states that people capable of manipulating spiritual energy are extremely rare in all regions of the world. He points out that among those warriors, those who manage to overcome the barriers to become grandmasters are even fewer. Gyeomju touches her long hair and comments that despite being rare, they seem to find these warriors frequent. She orders coldly for her men to stay quiet and hidden until the intruder gets tired and decides to leave there. The blonde complains about who would be the idiot causing problems and criticizes the silly idea of wanting to pose as a hero. She states with disdain that in real life, people just need to know how to adapt and follow the natural flow of things. The spiky-haired henchman whispers to himself, quite intrigued upon remembering a gossip about a ghost. Upon noting the guard's whisper, Gyeomju turns quickly and demands harshly to know if he heard any news. The soldier asks if she remembers when the collectors sent to the gambling house disappeared a few days ago. The other guard explains that they disappeared out of nowhere, but as outsourced workers disappear always, they decided to ignore the occurrence. The henchman agrees hesitantly, but lets show on his face that he still feels a strong and strange doubt. Gyeomju totally loses patience with the suspense and shouts, demanding that he stop stalling and say it soon at once. He stammers with fear, explaining that he heard very strange rumors coming directly from that old gambling house. The rumors claimed that people witnessed the frightening attack of a creature they called a hungry ghost. He confesses that he doesn't usually believe in silly superstitions, but that the number of witnesses prevented him from ignoring them. The villain gets deeply irritated and asks with anger what the idiot stories of dying survivors matter there. She states with arrogance that as business people, they should be focused only on productive and useful dialogue. Suddenly, Gyeomju focuses her look in silence while a terrible possibility begins to take over her cold mind. She wonders, scared, if another mysterious being like the master who taught her to use unknown martial arts would exist. The discussion is interrupted when another soldier invades the room desperate, shouting that they are in severe trouble. The messenger reports in panic that another of the sect's operating bases was totally destroyed and reduced to ashes. The blonde asks with hatred if the author was the masked man, and the guard confirms, trembling, that they saw a man in a white mask. She sighs, irritated, admitting that she was already expecting to lose a few more control points before the intruder calmed down. Gyeomju concludes that such a masked man must be a formidable warrior for destroying bases protected by elite guards. She decides to keep the initial plan of ignoring because she states that common soldiers are disposable and easy to replace in the clan. The senior guard agrees, remembering that hiring high-level mercenary warriors would cost a fortune for the sect. Tired of the conversation, she orders everyone to leave her presence and tells them to prepare a massage session immediately. The butler bows respectfully and warns that he will fulfill his mistress's wish without losing any more moment. Suddenly, the large gates are opened with force, and another messenger shouts, terrified that they are in severe trouble. The blonde turns her face with hatred, grinding her teeth in frustration upon realizing that another operating base must have fallen. The day dawns in the busy city of Luoyang, marking the beginning of a morning full of bustle among the residents. In the middle of the market, the citizens whisper, scared, about the 5 secret bases that were destroyed in a single night. Another merchant intervenes, correcting the gossip, and states that in fact the correct number of attacked branches was 7. The discussion increases at the fair, while some say it was 10 temples, and others claim that 15 locations were cleared. The people comment, scared, that no body was left behind, and that not even a single drop of blood remained on the ground. Everyone wonders, scared, about who in the world would be capable of making so many people disappear without leaving any trace. In the imposing residence of the Sword family, the great patriarch complains, irritated, for being bothered with feudal matters. Before the Grand Council, Gyeomju questions, indignant, the reason why the prestigious family possesses no information. The Supreme Elder stares at the blonde with disdain and calls her a cheeky brat, asking when he said he didn't know anything. The old man focuses his intimidating look and asks if she really dares to suggest that the legendary family lacks in. Feeling the immense murderous pressure of the elder, Gyumju retreats a step, scared, while cold sweat runs down her face. Realizing her grave error of insolence, she bows quickly and asks for sincere apologies for the audacity of her word. The leader reprimands her, saying that she forgot her own place and that she must be delirious to speak that way. The old man remembers with disdain that he handed the valuable bronze seal to her out of pure whim and not by her father's influence. Gyumju guarantees, trembling with fear, that she would never dare to think so insolently against the Supreme Elder's sovereignty. The elderly man observes the sand of the hourglass running on the table, maintaining a totally icy and indifferent expression to the blonde. He complains that he already lost 15 precious minutes of his day due to that silly discussion provoked by her presence. The patriarch of the family says with absolute fury for Gyumju to disappear immediately from before his eyes. The blonde bows deeply in respect and begins to withdraw from the hall without saying a single word. She walks with firm and serious steps through the immense corridor, demonstrating all her frustration with the conversation. The patriarch warns her coldly, saying that if she fails one more time, she will suffer severe consequences. Upon hearing the leader's harsh threat, Gyumju hesitates for an instant, feeling the weight of the words on her back. The old man states with authority that he will pass the family's valuable bronze seal to another person if she fails. Gyumju stands completely shocked upon realizing that she may lose everything she conquered with so much effort in the sect. The scene cuts to the family observatory where a morning shout warns that the sun is already high in the sky. The family astronomer continues sleeping deeply over a huge pile of old books and reports. His assistant sighs discouraged, realizing he will have no choice but to wake the lazy one by force. He shakes his companion with force, shouting that a very serious emergency is happening at that moment. The guy wakes up scared, while the colleague asks for calm and reveals having witnessed something bizarre on the night shift. With an extremely serious expression, he states convincingly that he saw a terrible omen emerge in the sky. The astronomer takes a sip of water with disdain, commenting that common omens happen all the time in the world. The guy retorts immediately, saying that the sign seen the previous night is by far the biggest and worst of them all. He reveals having observed the feared and legendary celestial assassin star shining intensely in the darkness. The astronomer spits the water out of dread, asking if that is really the legendary star that brings terrible tragedies. Legend has it that since ancient times the celestial star always came accompanied by bloody massacres. The astronomer stands thoughtful, realizing that the appearance of that star is a matter of extreme global importance. The young assistant suggests, worried, that they should immediately report this discovery to their organization's superiors. The companion bursts into laughter, arguing that no one in their right mind would believe such a story. The guy insists, saying that at least they should pass the warning to the supervisor officer of their organization. The astronomer doubts it makes a difference, but the colleague insists that reporting the fact remains their duty. They remember that the supervisor is the youngest and powerless heir of the entire influential sword family. Night falls over a small village while the dark mist envelops the humble wooden houses of the location. A group of residents gathers anxious around an elder, asking if he can see anything in today's sky. One of the men asks for them to stop rushing the old man because he needs absolute silence to concentrate. The blind master remains in compenetrated silence, trying to see the hidden secrets beyond the darkness. The elder says, scared, that he can no longer see the sun because the sky was completely swallowed by dense darkness. Suddenly, a strong revelation hits the old master's mind, making him feel deeply scared. He stands up with a jump, feeling an immense mystical energy that makes his entire body tremble with excitement. The elder raises his hands, proclaiming to the four winds that the feared sovereign of the dark sky finally awakened. He asks in a trance if the legendary demonic scripture has awakened, and if the ancient monster that devours skies has returned. The old man shouts that the master of the dark sky descended to the mortal world to severely punish all sinners. He says, for the oppressed and hungry to rejoice, with the arrival of the divinity that will bring true justice. The elder claims that black lightning will fall from indifferent skies to announce the triumphant arrival of the venerable master. Some residents wonder if that is true, while others think the old man finally went crazy once and for all. The elder laughs hysterically, celebrating the fact that the true savior has finally returned to the world. Legend says for everyone to respect the white-masked demon because he is the relentless executor of punishments. Meanwhile, at the palace, Seowa is surprised to learn that the rival faction was almost annihilated in just 2 days. She analyzes the information, concluding that the main clue is the white-masked spirit of the dark sky. The young woman remembers thoughtfully that the mysterious figure she herself met in the past wore this same mask. She turns in the chair and asks her loyal bodyguard, Gyu, what she thinks of the whole bizarre situation. Gyu stares at her mistress seriously, asking confused about which of the subjects she would like to know her opinion on. Seowa says she refers to the young master of the sword family, while Gyu asks if she speaks of the young man without a sword. The young woman warns, irritated, for her not to use that derogatory nickname, and the bodyguard apologizes for the error. Gyu comments thoughtfully that she had the clear impression that that young heir is very different from the local gossip. Seowa jokes, saying that with this naivety, Gyu shouldn't reveal she works for the Crescent Moon Pavilion. Gyu explains with a calm smile that she found the young master incredibly generous and very open-minded. She reveals that she tried to intimidate him by sending her killer aura, but the young guy didn't even blink his eyes in fear. Seowa remains silent for a few moments, pondering deeply if her bodyguard's words are real. Suddenly, an irritated voice echoes, demanding explanations from Gyu about what she had been doing during all that time. In the residence's kitchen, Seowa decides to question a young servant who is taking care of the daily stove chores. The purple-haired woman turns curious and asks if she is referring specifically to her young master. Seowa says that she would just like to better understand what type of person the guy really is in the daily life of the residents. The servant continues cutting the vegetables calmly and answers that in fact she doesn't have much to report about him. Seowa finds that very strange, remembering that last time the servant almost attacked her to defend the guy's honor. The cook ignores the distrust and asks if Seowa is recovered, receiving a positive and grateful answer. The girl advises Seowa to speak directly to the young master in case she has any real doubt about his attitude. Back in the hall, hot tea is served delicately in the cup, exhaling a soft and very comforting aroma. The young master asks gently for them not to emanate killer intentions so as not to spoil the special flavor of the tea. Gyu smiles, saying there is no reason for worry, while Seowa is surprised to hear about a mission. The guy smiles warmly and offers the hot drink so that both enjoy it before it cools completely. Seowa thanks quite awkwardly, arguing that there is no need to serve a simple personal bodyguard. Gyu accepts the cup quickly with respect, while Seowa observes the companion's agile attitude with some astonishment. The guard takes a sip and compliments the wonderful aroma, commenting that the young master understands very well the art of making tea. The heir of the sword family smiles in a friendly way, thanking sincerely for the unexpected compliment from the warrior woman. She guarantees she is not just being polite because she is not the type of woman who usually gives false compliments to anyone. The guy finds it funny and jokes, saying she can work for him at any moment in case she wants to change jobs. Gyu accepts laughing and comments that perhaps she will need the vacancy soon due to the bad recent mood of her current direct boss. The heir bursts into laughter with the warrior's audacity, having immense fun with the spontaneity of the conversation. Seowa observes in silence, finding it bizarre that her demanding guard is acting so friendly with the guy. The young master decides to change the course of the conversation and focuses his attention directly on the guest with a serene smile. He asks with curiosity what would bring someone so busy to visit a lazy and unemployed young man like him. Seowa adjusts herself in the chair quite formally, demonstrating that the subject to be treated is of extreme gravity. She fixes her look on the young master and asks directly if he is actually the feared protector of the dark sky. The guy pretends total innocence, smiling slightly, and asks with disdain what this mysterious protector would be. Seo-ah explains that the survivors of the rival faction reported very specific details about the mysterious savior. She tells that the man who saved them wore simple white scholar clothes and wore a frightening white mask. The heir just comments in a relaxed way that such masked man seems to be a good soul dedicated to doing good. The young woman retorts without hesitation, stating that she knows perfectly that the guy possesses exactly the same disguise stored. The guy smiles mysteriously and asks in a mocking tone if she is planning to search his personal belongings. Restless, she demands to know the truth and questions the true meaning of the shocking words he said in the past. The young master holds his teacup, maintaining an extremely calm and indecipherable posture before the insistence. He stares at the young woman in the eyes seriously and asks firmly if she is really prepared to face the truth. Seo-ah answers with determination and without any hesitation that she already made her final decision and is totally ready. He questions her if that readiness includes bearing the weight of the inevitable death of countless innocent people. The young woman confesses that she spent every day thinking deeply about the enigmatic words she heard from his mouth. She pondered about the historical river of blood necessary to change once and for all the chaotic path of humanity. Seo-ah clenches her fists with strength, decided to accept the necessary sacrifices in case that is the only valid alternative. She asks directly if the bold plan of the young master actually involves provoking a great dynastic revolution. The guy repeats her words thoughtful, demonstrating an enigmatic air while he processes the gravity of the question. He cites ancient teachings, explaining that he who wounds benevolence and justice is nothing but a mere thief. The young master compliments that an unscrupulous and ruthless ruler loses the right to be treated as king. He uses historical metaphors to explain that overthrowing a cruel tyrant should never be considered a crime of treason. Seo-ah listens with attention and asks if the dangerous path he mentioned refers specifically to that choice. The young master describes a chaotic scenario full of suffering and destruction, resembling a true hell. He defines the journey as the demonic trail and questions reflectively if something like that would be possible in the current era. The young woman admits, frustrated, that the complexity of that question is far beyond her personal capacity of understanding. The guy reflects on the severe social abyss between rich and poor, questioning how the world still maintains itself so stable. The guy states, laughing, that planning a dynastic revolution in a complicated era like theirs is a complete absurdity. Seo-ah stares at him seriously and asks what would then be the true path he intends to follow from now on. He explains that he thought quite a bit about the subject and that historical bloodshedding is inevitable to change the world. The guy questions if the shed blood really needs to be that of common citizens who fight under a flag of a great cause. He opens a dark and bizarre smile, suggesting that it would be much better to focus on eliminating only the bad people of the world. Seo-ah retreats, scared by the sadistic tone of his suggestion, and asks with distrust if he is serious about that. The young master proposes that the blood of tyrants and sinners drains in the same amount that the innocent would be shed. The girl tries to calm down, thinking it's just a joke without grace, and questions if the innocent will really bleed in the sect. He stands calmly from the table, explaining that all that complex conversation is just a simple theoretical hypothesis. The guy begins to walk in the direction of the exit of the hall, alleging that he just likes to reflect on life's possibilities. Seo-ah thinks to herself that that is a childish idea because it is almost impossible to truly distinguish good from evil. The guy from behind argues that even if they could, the concepts of law and morality change constantly according to the situation. She states that classifying and eliminating sinners arbitrarily is impossible because no one possesses so much combat power. Seo-ah adds that judging and punishing sinners out of pure personal whim is the attitude of a madman who spreads an even worse evil. Suddenly, the young woman's eyes widen in pure shock upon connecting the facts and realizing the guy's true identity. She remembers the terrible stories about the white-masked reaper known as the sacred executor of the dark sky. Legend has it that the mystical entity was sent to discharge black lightning of divine fury over the indifferent earth. The young woman begins to tremble with dread upon whispering out loud the feared and legendary name of the venerable master of the dark sky. The guy smiles in a macabre way, complimenting the striking code name and guaranteeing that the Reaper would certainly also love the title. Ioa stares at the guy, perplexed upon noting that that hypothesis considered childish by her is about to become reality. The heir turns with a relaxed smile, commenting that he is quite curious to see if the Reaper's plan will work. The young woman wonders if that dark path focused on charging the price of sins is something that only a demon would traverse. She grinds her teeth, demonstrating a deep mixture of rage and astonishment with the shocking revelations of that conversation. The girl thanks formally for the words and says goodbye in a hurry, alleging to have urgent matters to solve out there. The young master wishes for them to have a good journey, while the two warrior women retreat hurriedly from the meeting room. Already in the corridor, Seoa analyzes the current situation, commenting that the feared Blackbone faction now possesses only its main base. She reveals that she intends to lead a small group of elite warriors to attack directly the enemy headquarters today. Remembering Gyeomju's power with the Bronze Seal, the companion warns about the danger and the sect's lack of mercy. Seoa calms the ally, guaranteeing that they won't invade the base directly because there is already another person in charge of that. The leader states, decided that their plan will be to close the siege to ensure that no fugitive manages to escape alive from there today. She adds that if the influential Sword family decides to create problems because of this attack, the group will act without fear. Seoa says that they will need to deal only with the guilty elder who handed the Bronze Seal irresponsibly to the young woman guarantees firmly that all her squad possesses determination to spare to face any danger that arises. Inside the silent hall, the young master remains alone and thoughtful, awaiting the right moment to start his move. He observes the beautiful view of the balcony under the warm glow of sunset, keeping his hands joined behind his back. Suddenly, a violent red sword cut crosses the screen frighteningly, signaling the start of a new battle. The Black Bone executioner executes mercilessly several members of the faction itself who were trying to flee desperate from there. The traitor's head collapses to the sand floor, while the guard leader spits on the corpse without demonstrating any pity. The muscular warrior cleans the bloodied blade of his sword, shouting infuriated against the extreme cowardice of the soldiers. He roars furiously, reminding everyone that punishing deserters mercilessly is a direct order of Mistress Gyeomju. Raising his weapon high, the commander orders all the remaining warriors to prepare to die with honor in combat. Meanwhile, the sun sets at Gyeomju's hideout, revealing an imposing structure that serves as a shelter for the blonde villain. Inside the office, the leader turns to her lackey and asks apprehensive if her father also refused to send reinforcement. The subordinate confirms with a quite tense countenance and head bowed, demonstrating the despair with the negative answer. She complains, irritated, knowing that her father would never send elite warriors to face an opponent of unknown strength. The blonde grinds her teeth with much hatred upon realizing that the entire relationship she has with her father is nothing but a sham. She clenches her fist with so much force that she trembles, remembering that the old man's adopted daughters are treated as mere disposable pieces. The guard warns that the patriarch left a final message to deliver and Gyeomju demands anxious for him to tell the content soon. The man hesitates for an instant, demonstrating extreme dread of revealing the message while the villain stares at him with a murderous look. Upon hearing the terrible message, Gyeomju widens her red eyes of pure fury, letting out a hysterical scream of indignation. Gyeomju lets out a deafening scream of pure fury and begins to break everything she sees in front of her in her luxurious office. She grinds her teeth with much hatred, sweating with frustration, upon realizing that she was completely abandoned by her own family. The villain stares at her lackey irritated and demands to know exactly how many prisoners still remain in the main base dungeon. The lackey stammers, scared, explaining that not many remain because they rarely conduct prisoner transactions there. Gyeomju laments having to use the forbidden technique taught by her terrible master, but realizes that she has no other alternative. She orders cruelly for them to gather immediately all the prisoners and useless servants in the underground dungeon. With a totally insane expression, the villain reveals that she will use their lives to perform the macabre ritual of her former master. A crow flies silently over the gigantic enemy fortress, marking the beginning of a quite dark night. The masked warriors observe the movement from the top of the roofs, ensuring that everyone remains on maximum alert. They prepare their sharp weapons, hiding their faces with black cloths, ready to act at the slightest sign of base invasion. The black bird continues flying over the fortress roofs, observing the hidden warriors who guard the darkness. One of the masked spies lands softly on the dark tiled roof, keeping his eyes focused on the enemy movement. He makes a discreet signal with his head for the companion who is positioned on the top of the neighboring building watching everything. The warrior communicates with headquarters, warning that the 15th attack unit is already properly positioned. The experienced goatee commander confirms the coordinates, demanding that all squadrons await the attack signal. The sect ninjas run swiftly, jumping with precision between the roofs under the reddish penumbra of the late afternoon. Several masked combatants advance in a coordinated and silent way, as if they were true shadows on the horizon. One of the scouts lands with light steps and without making any sound on the tiles, preparing for the start of the siege. The messenger reports to Mistress Seoa that all innocent civilians of that region have already been evacuated with total safety. He adds that the Allied agents are completely positioned at the strategic points, just awaiting orders. Seoa smiles slightly under the black mask and orders for everyone to maintain positions with absolute attention and rigorous vigilance. She demands that the combat protocol be followed strictly as soon as the battle starts, and her men agree promptly. The fortress of the rival faction appears imposing under the orange sky, about to become the stage for a bloody confrontation. Gyu notices the seriousness of her mistress, who observes the thoughtful horizon and asks if she is feeling nervous. The two warrior women dressed in black combat suits exchange compenetrated looks before starting the great invasion. The young woman answers that she doesn't feel nervous, but with her heart quite confused due to everything she discovered recently. Seoa asks if Gyu listened to the entire conversation from earlier with the eye. Young master and the protector swears she didn't hear anything. Gyu jokes, asking to be spared from dangerous gossip about revolutions, while Seoa demands she stop pretending to be stupid. Insistent, the pavilion leader asks directly what was the true impression that the guard had about the young master. Gyu answers that despite finding him frightening, she feels in the bottom of her heart that the young heir is actually a good man. Seoa agrees, saying that even knowing his secret identity as a reaper, her instinct says to trust the guy. With her eyes glowing with loyalty, Gyu smiles behind the mask, guaranteeing that she will follow her mistress wherever she goes. The protector advises her mistress to just follow the desires of her own heart without caring about others' opinions. Seoa thanks her faithful friend's affection, feeling much calmer and confident to face the destiny that awaits her. With decided hearts, the two jump from the quarters and walk with determination to initiate the offensive against the faction. Seoa remembers the guy's bizarre plan of hunting tyrants until changing the course of history, finding that entire idea madness. Despite finding the plan absurd, the young woman hesitates for a brief instant. Feeling he might be the only one capable of achieving this, she turns her face subtly, remembering the deep look of the mysterious long-haired guy who stirred her conviction. Seoa admits to herself that perhaps the feared sovereign of the dark sky is indeed the only one capable of changing the course of history. Meanwhile, at the gang base, the twilight sky begins to be cut by sparks of pure spiritual energy. One of the muscular enforcers, covered in skull tattoos of the enemy gang, prepares to resist the imminent invasion. The bald giant bellows furiously, cursing against the cursed invaders who dared to attack his gang's territory. The fortress defenders draw their swords furious, complaining that any worm now thinks they have the right to attack them. The big brute shouts, demanding that his imbecile subordinates stop hesitating and attack the opponents without mercy or pity. The gang warriors advance in a dash, wielding their heavy weapons and screaming with deafening fury in the courtyard. One of the invading warriors advances with speed and roars with determination while pulling his sharp blade for combat. The two front lines collide violently, generating extremely swift sword cuts that spread blood through the air. One of the defenders is taken by surprise, being cut lethally and falling to his knees on the damp ground of the battle courtyard. The tattooed commander widens his eyes, horrified upon realizing the ease with which his men are being massacred. One of the invaders executes a brutal spinning attack, tearing apart an opponent's chest with surgical combat precision. The masked warrior hits the opponent's chest with a sure blow, spreading fresh blood across the stone floor. Dozens of enemies fall wounded and agonizing through the alleys of the courtyard while they scream in panic, begging for their lives. The bald big brute is hit squarely by a devastating cut to the chest, letting out a scream of pure pain with the impact. He realizes that the situation is terrible and orders, desperate, for his men to make room for reinforcements to advance. The lackeys obey quickly, opening the way while the masked warriors maintain their combat positions. A large line of muscular spearmen covered in tattoos appears in the courtyard, reinforcing the defense of the enemy. The messenger enters in panic and reports to Seoa that the enemies just brought a feared spearmen unit. From the top of the terrace, Seoa and Gyu note that the number of enemies is growing because they emptied the base's guard. The leader orders all reserves to enter into action immediately, giving freedom for the commanders to act however they want. Seoa stares at the courtyard, thoughtful, noting that the rival band preferred to bet all chips on the attack than protecting the home. She deduces they must have hired high-level mercenary warriors, but fears her own forces will get overloaded. Gyu asks, worried, if there will be reinforcements against the Bronze Seal, and Seoa guarantees many clans want to destroy the gang. The young leader hesitates for an instant, demonstrating certain concern with the real dimension of the problems that will come ahead. She confesses in a relaxed way that she already took all responsibility in case the offensive ends up going wrong in the end. Seoa tries to reassure her companion, remembering that the powerful sovereign of the dark sky is on their side to help. She comments confident that if he is as strong as the legends say, they will be able to just hitch a ride on his immense power. Suddenly, a colossal and deafening explosion happens at the location, throwing incandescent debris in all directions. One of the allied warriors is thrown brutally through the air with the terrible impact of the detonation's shockwave. Seoa widens her eye in pure shock and disbelief upon witnessing the devastating violence of that sudden attack. She tries to understand where so much destruction came from, while the flames consume rapidly the wooden structures of the base. Gyu shouts, desperate, extending her hand to rescue her mistress, amidst the shower of debris falling from the burning roof. With impressive reflexes, the loyal bodyguard jumps and grabs Seoa in her arms, saving her from the imminent collapse. Gyu asks, afflicted, if her mistress is okay, while the leader recovers from the scare, groaning in pain due to the strong impact. Still stunned, Seoa observes the surroundings, trying to process what type of creature would be capable of generating such destruction. The temple roof begins to collapse completely, transforming the entire luxurious location into an immense and dangerous curtain of fire. A shrill and frightening female laugh echoes through the ruins, immediately calling the attention of the two warrior women. Seoa stares at the smoke with extreme horror upon noting a bizarre silhouette approaching calmly amidst the burning flames. Enveloped in a dark aura and with a monstrous appearance, Gyeomju resurges from the ashes, leaving the allies terrorized. The immense temple collapses totally, generating a deafening crash that echoes through all the mountains of that region. Heavy wooden debris continues to fall on all sides, spreading embers and suffocating smoke through the destroyed courtyard. The two warrior women retreat with difficulty, trying to find a safe location to escape from the overwhelming heat of the fire. Seoa observes, scared, the transformation of the enemy without managing to believe in the bizarre visual the blonde suddenly assumed. Gyeomju's hands turned into sharp and reddish claws, demonstrating the terrible effects of her forbidden technique. The owner of the pavilion remains without reaction before the monstrosity of the adversary, who emanates an unbelievable bloodthirst. With a macabre smile and red eyes of pure insanity, Gyeomju roars Seoa's name, thirsty for immediate revenge. The young woman wonders, horrified, how the blonde ended up transforming into that frightening monster without any humanity. Gyeomju fixes her murderous look on Seoa, pronouncing her title with mockery and preparing herself to deal a fatal attack. The villain jumps in their direction, shouting insanely that she will harvest the life of the pavilion leader with her own hands today. Seoa widens her eye in dread upon realizing the absurd and deadly speed with which the creature advances in her direction. Gyu throws herself in front of her mistress, extending her arm heroically to protect her from the devastating impact of the villain's claw. The loyal bodyguard assumes the combat front line, intercepting the lethal blow to save the life of her mistress. Gyu shouts, desperate, demanding that her mistress flee from there as fast as possible before it is too late to save herself. Seoa extends her hand, afflicted, shouting her companion's name while being dragged by the dust of the explosion on the floor. She grinds her teeth with rage and frustration upon seeing herself forced to retreat and leave her best warrior behind in the combat. The girl runs in a dash through the ruins, begging mentally for Gyu to manage to survive the fury of that blonde monster. She wonders, afflicted, where the young master and the powerful reaper of the dark sky would be at a critical moment like that. One more strong blast of wind and dust cuts the air in the battlefield, indicating that the life-or-death fight continues intense. Gyeomju grumbles, irritated, upon realizing that her main prey is trying to escape from the courtyard amidst all that smoke. The blonde villain mocks the escape, calling Seoa a cowardly fool while preparing to chase her with her insane speed. Suddenly, a strong warrior enters Gyeomju's path, blocking her passage and warning that he will be her opponent. Gyeomju grinds her teeth, furious, demanding for the bodyguard to leave her path immediately so as not to be destroyed. Gyu lifts her sword with a firm posture, responding that she is the one who should retreat in case she still wants to continue alive today. The warrior woman states with extreme pride that she will not surrender easily before the frightening threats of the terrible villain. The story narrates about the existence of an invisible barrier that limits the progress of all practitioners of martial arts. Legend has it that all warriors reach a critical point of their journey where progress ceases upon hitting a wall. Those few capable of overcoming this immense mystical barrier obtain strength so devastating that they become other beings. It is for this reason that the legendary warriors who overcome this power wall are called grandmasters by the world. Back to the real confrontation, Gyu feels the terrible pressure of the devastating spiritual power that emanates from her enemy's body. The loyal bodyguard widens her eye, scared, upon realizing that Gyeomju's current strength is much superior to everything she has ever seen. She notes, worried, that her own level barely touched the wall while the blonde delivers a frightening attack in her direction. Gyu concludes in panic that Gyeomju is without a shadow of doubt an authentic grandmaster who overcame the human limits of power. The red claw attack hits the ground with devastating force, breaking the courtyard stones and raising much dust. The two warrior women begin to exchange extremely fast and dangerous blows in the middle of the whirlwind of dust and flames of the location. The blonde villain delivers an incredibly swift claw blow, trying to rip the bodyguard's defense with pure brutality. Gyeomju executes a devastating sequence of red energy cuts that cover the entire field of vision of her opponent. Gyu manages to block the attack by very little, but is shocked by the brutal strength contained in the rival's monstrous arm. The warrior woman wonders, desperate, how the villain is capable of manipulating so much energy without needing to use any spiritual weapon. One more violent crash happens the moment the powers of the two collide, generating an immense shockwave in the courtyard. Gyeomju laughs aloud with mockery, questioning if the guard really thought she could defeat her with such pathetic power. The villain channels her dark energy and launches a continuous blast of red spiritual energy palms over the opponent. Gyu tries to defend herself from the multiple energy explosions, but is pushed back by the devastating force of the enemy attack. The soil cracks completely under the bodyguard's feet, demonstrating the severe impact that her body is suffering in the battle. Suddenly, Gyeomju resurges right before Gyu's eyes, preparing her sharp claws to deliver the final blow. With a sadistic and cold look, the villain states that insolent worms must be eliminated without any type of hesitation. She roars, telling the opponent to move out of the way while releasing an immense blast of destructive energy in the direction of the warrior. An immense curtain of red flames and explosions consumes the location, covering the entire courtyard with a dense black cloud of smoke. Gyu is hit violently by the devastating impact of the blow, being thrown with much force against the destroyed floor. The bodyguard collapses to her knees, spitting much blood and feeling that her body reached the extreme limit of her forces. Gyeomju walks slowly, approaching the fallen opponent while Gyu continues coughing blood amidst the dense courtyard dust. The blonde villain stares at the injured warrior from above with a look of deep contempt and pride of her evil spiritual strength. With a sarcastic smile on her face, Gyeomju comments, surprised, that the opponent managed to survive even after receiving that blow. She compliments the adversary's resistance in an ironic way, while Gyu breathes with extreme difficulty behind her mask. The bodyguard notes she avoided death by little, but realizes that the constant use of her energy exhausted all her power. Gyu wonders for how much longer she will still manage to resist, scared by the fact that the rival fought only with empty hands. She stares apprehensively at the red palms of spiritual energy that continue floating around the terrible blonde villain in the courtyard. The warrior tries to understand what type of macabre ritual or bizarre body modification the adversary performed on herself. Even wounded and without energy, Gyu grips her sword handle firmly, decided to fight until her last breath of life. She stands with difficulty, maintaining her combat posture before the monstrous villain who observes her with amusement. Gyeomju gets irritated by the opponent's silence, complaining that she demonstrated no gratitude even after receiving her compliment. The blonde villain calls her an insolent girl, while Gyu hesitates for an instant upon feeling the immense spiritual pressure of the rival. Gyeomju raises her red spiritual energy to the maximum level, preparing herself to launch a definitive attack against the guard. Gyu feels cold sweat running down her face upon noting that the immense murderous intention of the villain blocked all her exit. The monstrous grandmaster challenges the opponent to try blocking her next lethal attack with that exhausted strength of hers. A gigantic red and dark energy cut descends from the heavens in the direction of the bodyguard with relentless speed. Feeling there is no escape, Gyu widens her eyes, resigned to the fact that that will be the definitive end of her life there. Suddenly, an immense, dark metal shield surges out of nowhere, blocking the villain's devastating blow with extreme ease. A young warrior with tied hair and wearing a giant metal glove assumes the defense, saving the bodyguard from death. Gyu stands completely paralyzed and surprised without managing to understand where that mysterious giant-gloved savior emerged from. She stares at the new combatant in silence, trying to discover the identity of the mysterious warrior who blocked the lethal attack. The young woman with the giant glove opens a mocking smile, quite confident, demonstrating that she does not fear Gyeomju's monstrous strength. A friendly voice surges, asking in a joking way if they ended up making the group wait for too long. Suddenly, a bearded warrior in green clothes attacks Gyeomju by surprise, making Gyu retreat completely perplexed. The man performs a very agile acrobatic movement, landing on his feet on the stone floor with extreme lightness and precision. The young woman with the giant gloves smiles in a friendly way, confirming with joy that they are the long-awaited Allied reinforcements. The bearded warrior shouts, alerting the young woman to take care at the moment when a large yellow light cut explodes. Seoa observes the terrible red smoke rising, noting that the blonde adversary is by far the most dangerous opponent there. The bearded man fears they won't make it out alive from that location, but the girl guarantees that they can win if they fight well. To Gyu with her black suit asks, desperate, if there isn't any other powerful warrior to help in the comp. The young woman with the giant glove makes a sad expression and confesses that unfortunately, only they two came as reinforcement today. The trio positions themselves side by side, facing the terrible grandmaster amidst the destroyed courtyard covered in hot ashes. Gyu supports her trembling hand against the ground, trying to find strength to stand up and continue fighting until the end. The bearded swordsman draws his large blade, admitting that there is no other choice but to face the danger head-on. Gyeomju remains floating and emanating frightening red energy while observing the three warriors from above. With a sarcastic smile, the villain asks if they have already finished talking and challenges them to attack together like insects. The sun continues to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red and orange while chaos consumes the entire base. Other masked Alliance warriors prepare their weapons, hiding in the shadows, ready to act in their sector. Seo-ah observes the surroundings with much apprehension, fearing that her plans to surround the enemy base will end up failing today. The main temple burns in flames, generating dense black smoke that can be seen from any point in that region. The young leader asks, afflicted, if there really aren't more warriors available to help contain the counterattacks. The guard confirms with his head lowered, leaving Seo-ah extremely irritated and worried about the fate of her squadrons. One of the ninjas shouts desperate, carrying a wounded companion, and warns that casualties are severe and they need to retreat. Another soldier surges, reporting in panic that the 17th Attack Squadron is under heavy attack and begs for urgent support. Seo-ah stands totally without reaction and horrified upon knowing that even the 10th Squadron was forced to retreat from battle. Terrible sounds of metal colliding and screams of agony continue echoing throughout the enemy base under the red light of sunset. The masked warriors try to contain the gang's big brutes, exchanging ferocious and very fast life-or-death blows. One of the defenders blocks a heavy spear blow with much difficulty, feeling the impact vibrate through his entire body. The allied soldier widens his eyes, scared, wondering how those enemies can possess such monstrous strength. He stares with horror at a criminal with bright red eyes who continues fighting, even having a sword stuck in his belly. The ally realizes, desperate, that the opponent feels no pain and tries to deliver a kick to move him away by any means. With an agile jump, the masked warrior kicks the brute's chest, throwing the opponent with much force against the ground. He takes the opportunity to deliver a lethal blow to the enemy's throat, trying to silence him once and for all. The red-eyed criminal falls totally lifeless on the courtyard ground, spreading a large trail of blood around. Another insane brute surges running and attacks with his giant axe, shouting with fury against the masked invader. The two exchange ferocious metal blows, generating bright sparks that illuminate the temple's burning wooden walls. The Alliance warrior retreats, scared, upon hearing more screams of agony coming from his companions who were fighting right behind. He observes the battlefield horrified, feeling that irrational and violent monsters are dominating that entire courtyard. The young man stares at the massacre with extreme dread, realizing that the confrontation situation went totally out of their control. The warrior concludes, desperate, that that courtyard in flames has transformed into a true hell of blood and destruction. Back in the hall, Gumju observes the trio of fallen opponents and pokes fun, asking if that pathetic strength was all they had. The blonde Grandmaster smiles sadistically, commenting that she expected the reinforcements to manage to resist for a longer time. The young woman with the giant glove tries to stand up, even being seriously wounded, while Gyu observes the villain with total despair. Suddenly, the green jade amulet attached to the bodyguard's belt begins to glow intensely, cracking with the spiritual power. The girl with the giant glove spits blood due to serious internal injuries, leaving Gyu even more desperate for her ally. Gyeomju laughs loudly in an insane way, commenting that watching the weak agonize and suffer was always her greatest amusement. The villain promises, laughing, that she will soon send their young master to the afterlife so that the trio doesn't feel lonely in the world of the dead. Gyu and the young ally observe the blonde villain with anguish, without managing to find a way to reverse that situation. At that moment of extreme despair, Gyu remembers when she begged for her mistress Seo-ah to flee from there in a hurry. She wonders, worried in her final thoughts, if her beloved mistress managed to escape in safety from the danger. Even on the verge of death, the brave bodyguard grips her sword handle with her bloodied hand, gathering her last forces. Gyu opens a slight smile behind the mask, decided to continue fighting with pride, even knowing there is no chance of victory. Gyu grinds her teeth, stating with determination that even very weak, she will never retreat before the imminent danger. Gumju laughs loudly, preparing a colossal sphere of red power to finish the opponent and send her to the other world. The terrible red energy blast is launched in Gyu's direction, crossing the air with deadly speed. The loyal bodyguard closes her eyes, resigned, awaiting the definitive impact that will certainly take her life there. Suddenly, a strong and enigmatic presence surges on the battlefield, catching Seo-ah's attention at a distance. The young leader turns quickly, feeling an immense spiritual pressure that paralyzes all the warriors nearby. In an instant, the world's colors seemed to distort completely, transforming into a negative and gloomy plane. Seoa widens her eye in absolute shock upon noting that the environment around was totally altered suddenly. The masked warriors and enemies enter panic upon realizing that the entire world darkened in a few seconds. Gyu feels a terrible shiver run down her spine while a dense, freezing mist begins to envelop her body. The air around becomes so icy that everyone's breath begins to freeze, announcing the sudden arrival of an eternal night. In the middle of the distorted darkness, the ferocious combats cease immediately due to the fear provoked by the mysterious anomaly. Allies and enemies remain completely frozen and paralyzed by the dread of feeling that frightening presence. All the present warriors manage to clearly feel the crushing weight of an immense spiritual power approaching. Total darkness swallows the entire enemy fortress, while purple and dark clouds completely cover the twilight sky. Aoa stares at the penumbra with extreme anxiety, feeling that the definitive moment of that confrontation finally began. In the middle of the mystical darkness surges the iconic white mask that seems to mock all the rotten expression existing in the world. A calm and imposing voice echoes from nowhere, asking if the people present there were anxious, awaiting his arrival. The young leader swallows hard upon recognizing immediately the mystical figure she was searching so much for on the battlefield. Under the purple mist surges the white-masked Reaper, the feared and legendary absolute sovereign of the dark sky.